In the blink of an eye, an ordinary gamer died and was reborn in the world of his favorite RPG. Now he finds himself as a despicable slave trader destined for a tragic end, but armed with all his knowledge of the game, he decides to change his fate. Instead of capturing the heroines, he frees them, using the rare items he had saved. What was supposed to be a quiet life quickly turns into total chaos. Everyone believes he is a legendary veteran. Epic misunderstandings, an accidental harem, and a reputation that keeps growing across the world. Welcome to this fantastic story. In the city of Aldea, on the first day, a boy was sitting at a table trying to have some peace, but another girl came up to him and said she had finally managed to find him, inviting him to do some things. Later, on the next day, the story repeated itself. Another girl went up to him saying she had finally managed to find him and that he needed to go to her estate. Once again, on the following day, the same story repeated itself. A blonde girl told him to go play with Remy, but this time, he did not give in so easily, saying that he could not do that because he was very busy. However, the little girl refused to accept it and kept shaking him, asking why not, since Remy finally had some free time, so he needed to play with her. Another woman arrived saying it would only be for a few minutes, so he did not need to make such a big drama out of it. How did he end up in this situation? To explain that, we need to go back in time a little. During the night, in the middle of a forest, two men were arguing with a rookie boy. He is the public executioner known as Master Kai. The man said that they were going to sleep now and that the protagonist needed to stand guard properly since they were paying him very well just to bring them there from the city of Wafer. The man asked whether the protagonist could at least do that, and the protagonist said yes. In addition, the man said that if the hostages happened to start screaming, all the protagonist had to do was beat them up and they would soon stop. Although it did not even look like the protagonist had the strength to do that. Kai looked at his hand and began to panic, wondering how things had ended up that way. The last thing he could remember was thinking that he had dragged someone into an accident. So maybe he had died at that exact moment, and when he came to his senses, he had ended up waking up in that place without understanding absolutely anything that was happening. Even so, he had vague memories that he somehow knew that place. He began to think a little more about it and realized that it was exactly like a game he had been playing the other day. However, right now, he should have been thinking about other things, because clearly, just by looking around, it was obvious that he was on the villain's side and that made no sense to him at all. Suddenly, he heard a small sound and looked back. As soon as he approached, he saw that it was an iron cage, and the hostages those two idiots had mentioned earlier were probably those girls. And if he was not mistaken, in the game he had played, all villains who were no longer needed were eliminated immediately. And if that really was the case, then being there was an even worse situation than he had imagined. Kai thought that maybe it would be better to run away as quickly as possible, and to do that, what he needed was money and a map, and stealing from bad people probably would not bring him any kind of punishment. If that really was the game he had played before, then he could probably escape without any problems, but before that, he needed to do something. He went to the girls' cage and called out to them, saying that they should escape together. But the older girl asked if that was some kind of joke because she knew very well that he was trying to deceive them. The other girl with white hair said that after everything that had happened, she saw no reason at all to trust what the protagonist was saying. The red-haired girl agreed with the white-haired woman, saying that the protagonist could barely answer, and it was a shame things had not gone the way he had planned. Kai opened the cage saying that it had taken him quite a long time to infiltrate the enemies, so he would like to sincerely apologize for taking so long to help them. The two of them were still hesitant to believe it, but the protagonist continued explaining that he was someone who worked for the intelligence agency. He had lied from beginning to end, but now making them believe he was on their side was the top priority. After explaining the situation, the protagonist asked them to hurry up, because if the bandits discovered what he was doing, then he would definitely be dead. The red-haired girl said that she would love to escape, but unfortunately she could not. Her leg had already been bad from the start, and now she was in no condition to leave. The white-haired woman emphasized that, as the protagonist himself could see, she was blind and could not see anything. Besides that, the poor girl named Remy was already completely exhausted and was now sick. So even if they managed to escape that camp, they would still end up dying in the middle of that forest. The red-haired girl said that just knowing the protagonist was not an enemy was already enough for them. The blind girl thanked him for the courage he was showing by trying to save them. But with her last strength, Remy stretched out her trembling hand and, in a shaky voice, begged for help. This deeply touched the protagonist. He said that escaping was still better than staying there, and if they could not walk, then he would carry them. The red-haired girl was surprised and asked what exactly he meant. The protagonist explained that he had a map and knew that area very well, so he could say that everything would be fine. He asked Remy and the blind girl to hold on to him, picked up the red-haired girl in his arms, and started walking with them through the forest. While he was carrying all of them, the protagonist thought that this body he currently had really was what he had imagined. It was very strong and nothing like his old self. He decided to put those thoughts aside and focus on his current mission because, for now, no one was chasing them. And that map from before showed the city of Aldea with the name he had given it when he was playing. And if the original game data still existed in that world somehow, then he should be able to know exactly where they needed to go now. Sometime later, he finally managed to find a house in a tree. The blind girl asked where that place was, and the protagonist explained that it was basically a hideout he himself had made. He looked at a stone with some things written on it, asked the three of them to wait there, and went over to it because, if he still remembered correctly, the password should be the same. As soon as he entered the password, he managed to open the door, and even while standing inside the house, he could not believe that it was still there. The protagonist began taking them inside, starting with Remy. As soon as he carried in the red-haired girl, she asked whether he was not just an ordinary agent. The blind girl said that building a treehouse in a place like that was not normal, but the protagonist was just as surprised as they were. As soon as he placed the blind girl on the bed, she asked what was going on, and the protagonist said it was nothing. Remy asked if everything was going to be all right, and the blind woman said she was worried too. The protagonist said that there should probably be some items stored there. The red-haired girl asked if there was anything they could give Remy to eat. The protagonist opened one of his chests and saw that the items were there exactly as he had thought because the system was the same as in the game, and that meant those things were still there. He said that he had some medicine and that it would probably work. But the red-haired girl asked him not to joke around at a time like that, since there was no way ordinary medicine would work on someone so weakened. However, as soon as she saw the bottle, she was surprised, and the protagonist said that it was not exactly ordinary medicine, so it would probably work. But the red-haired girl was still surprised by the color of that medicine. The protagonist had never been the type of person to keep things that were not very good, so those medicines were probably something rare, since he had played that game for many hours until he got sick of it. That potion was known as an instant cure. It restored health, energy, injuries, hunger, and all negative effects such as poison. Even in the game, that potion had already been difficult to synthesize, and he still had 117 of them, so money probably would not be a problem for him. And judging by that red-haired girl's reaction, it could probably be sold for a good price as well. The girls began to question who the protagonist really was, because there was no way a simple agent could have an item as valuable as that. He took a deep breath and handed them a potion, saying it was better not to ask so many questions for everyone's sake. He asked all of them to use that item because he did not want to keep walking around outside while carrying 3 people. The blind girl asked whether that legendary universal elixir really existed and whether there was one for her. The protagonist said yes and handed it to her. As soon as the girl held the bottle in her hand, she was enchanted because she could not believe that it was really happening. Kai went over to Remy saying that she had endured things very well until now, so she also deserved to drink hers. He opened the bottle and poured it into her mouth. As soon as she drank a little, her body began to glow. A few seconds later, her skin and face improved drastically, and she thanked him for everything he was doing. The protagonist asked her to rest for now because that medicine did not cure fatigue. The blind girl also drank her potion and began to cry because she could finally see again. The red-haired girl drank hers too and stood up, seeing that her leg had returned to normal. The protagonist said that when he managed to bring the 3 of them safely back home, he might be a little greedy when asking for a reward. But the girls did not care. They simply cried, shouting that they could finally see again. The protagonist thinks that he does not know exactly how long they had been suffering from that illness, but it is better to give them some space to enjoy that moment. The next day, after discovering that they had been kidnapped from the city of Aldea, he realizes that it is more than 2 cities away from there, and apparently, it will take quite a while before they can get back. The red-haired girl gets angry, telling the protagonist to go complain about that to those friends he had been hanging around with, since it is all their fault. Kai asks whether they really do not know how to use teleportation or something like that. The red-haired girl says that if anyone knew how to use a legendary spell like that, they would have escaped a long time ago. The protagonist laughs, saying that actually makes sense. He thinks that if only he had reincarnated as the character he used to play, then maybe he would be able to use teleportation. After checking the attributes of that new body of his, he was able to see that the body was average, something between a rank D and C treasure hunter, with nothing particularly special about it. The white-haired girl says that she heard that in the past there was only one person capable of using teleportation magic. The protagonist then explains that it is a legendary spell, so it is normal for only one person here and there to be able to use it. But the most important thing now is to know how they are doing. The white-haired girl says that, thanks to him, she can see, even though she has not fully recovered and she is still trying very hard. The red-haired girl says that her leg is fine now, so she is very grateful for his help and for the potion he gave them. She says that they had already introduced themselves before, so the protagonist needs to stop calling her Redhead because she has a name too, which is Karen Dior Aldi. The other girl also says her name, which is Nina Qualier Unsage, and the girl who is still lying down is Remy Tralia Alblera. The protagonist thinks that those names are much harder to remember than names in the real world. He points out that the big problem now is getting the three of them back to the city where they lived. Karen asks if that still applies, even if those villains show up again, and he says that, unfortunately, he cannot guarantee that. She is surprised and asks why. He points out that no matter how strong someone may be, there is no way to guarantee something that lies in the future. He thinks that, unlike in a game, this is real combat, with blood being spilled and lives at risk. There is a limit to what knowledge of the game can do, and he wants to avoid that limit at all costs, even if he has to give up other things. He points out that they do not know how many enemies there are or how strong they are, so if they want to survive, the best thing to do is avoid confrontation whenever possible. After all, each of them only has one life, and when they die, it simply ends. That is why he will do everything he can to avoid a direct confrontation. Karen asks if he has some kind of plan, and the protagonist says it is hard to answer when she puts it that way. The two of them are a little surprised. He tries to calm them down, saying that this is only what he thinks, but the enemies who kidnap them must be watching the area around the city of Wafer. Since it is the closest city to that place, and since the protagonist came from there, they may assume that he has some connection to it. And exactly because of that, instead of going north, they will head south, crossing that forest and passing through the settlement located just below it. And even if it costs a little money, they can ask someone to send carriages for them. Karen says that, unfortunately, they have almost nothing, but the protagonist says that he has a little money he took from one of the bandits and that they can use all of it, since they will also need new clothes. So it is better to spend freely and appear a little more generous, since the people there are very strict with outsiders. Nina asks why the protagonist is helping them so much, since he even used an incredibly valuable universal medicine and should not even have told them that he was an agent. Kai does not know how to answer, remembers the story he had told them, and realizes that he is a terrible liar. But he continues with the lies, saying that they can thank their parents, because if he had not received orders from above, he would not be doing any of this. Remy starts to wake up and the protagonist notices and asks if she can talk normally. She says that she is awake and feeling well, but he thinks it is a little late for all that. He points out that they need to adjust that plan better. When it gets dark, they need to wash themselves in the river because going during the day could cause problems, since they might be seen. Nina says that she can use purification magic. The protagonist says that she can use it on the other two because he will wash himself in the river since he cannot let a child take care of him. Karen is surprised, saying that it is surprising that the protagonist does not know how to use that, since it would be extremely useful for an agent. Kai explains that the more they use convenient magic like that, the easier it is to draw attention. Karen realizes that, indeed, he is not such an ordinary person. Nina uses purification magic on the two of them, and meanwhile, the protagonist bathes in the river. Once all of them are clean, they start going over the plan again. And with everything organized, he puts on his armor, saying that it is time to leave. 1 week later, in the city of Aldia, a man is ordering his subordinates to send that urgent report. The protagonist, who had just arrived in the city, points out that apparently the place seems very busy. Karen says that is obvious since they managed to return in one piece. The man from before calls the three of them young ladies and says that he is very happy they returned safely. Karen thanks him and points out that it was thanks to the protagonist that they were able to return safely. The man bows before the protagonist, saying that they have no words to thank him for what he has just done, so he may receive their deepest gratitude. He asks the three of them to wait inside the gate since an escort is coming to accompany them. Nina asks the protagonist what he's going to do now. Kai points out that he intends to stay in that city for a while. Karen explains that that is not exactly what they want to know, because the real question is whether he has any plans from now on, such as reporting what happened to his superiors. This surprises him because, in truth, he has no plan at all, but he needs to improvise. Karen says that he should go with them because she would end up losing some prestige if she did not give him a proper reward. The protagonist says that she can pay him another day since he does not have much time right now. Nina says that her family would also like to, but Kai interrupts, saying that can wait too, and the same goes for Remy, but she says that she does not want that either. Kai turns his face away, saying that he does not either. The truth is that he was completely exhausted, because unlike in a game, he had to stay alert the whole time, always on guard, and that was starting to take its toll on him, so he needed to rest soon. He asks them to follow the guard's instructions and wait in a separate room because they cannot relax until they are truly home. Karen says that she understands and points out that the protagonist is overly cautious. Nina smiles and thanks him once again for everything he did and for protecting them. Remy holds onto Kai's arm, but he asks her to stay with the others as well. As the three of them begin to follow the guards, the protagonist says that he will leave everything to them now, but the same man from before bows once again, begging him to let them thank him properly one more time, because they are truly grateful that he saved the three of them. Kai says that there is no need for all that because he only did what was right, but now he really needs to enter the city. The knight says that he can make himself completely at home in that city. As soon as the protagonist walks away, the other guards approach, asking who that guy is, because he was unbelievable. But the first guard who had received them says that, in truth, that boy is a monster, and anyone can tell just by looking, because he tried to use appraisal on the protagonist, but all he could identify was an extremely rare item from a level 8 dungeon, which means they have no idea what kind of ability he is really hiding. As soon as the other guards hear that it was a level 8 dungeon, they become frightened, since only 2 elite clans have managed to clear that place to this day. After all, not only did he face that brutal criminal organization called Red Freed and rescue the 3 of them without a single scratch, but he also prioritized their safety and remained alert to his surroundings, even while entering the city. So he can say without fear of being wrong that that guy is an extremely experienced veteran. Besides that, he would very much like to see the face behind that armor. The other 2 guards are surprised, asking whether that man's identity really was not checked, because that is practically negligence. But the first guard tells them not to talk nonsense, because how could they treat someone who risked his life to save the 3 young ladies as a criminal? Besides, they cannot do anything that might offend him, since he deserves special treatment. The other guard says that is not exactly what he meant, because, in truth, the protagonist had used 3 legendary universal potions, as if they were nothing. And now, thinking about it more carefully, it makes perfect sense that he would have a high enough level to clear a level 8 dungeon. The captain is surprised, asking if he really used a legendary universal elixir. His subordinate asks if the captain had not noticed, since all 3 of them had their conditions completely cured. Lady Karen's leg had been a problem, and she was walking normally. After all, they had heard that from the 3 of them earlier. They said that he does not waste time on things that are not excellent. Apparently, he simply handed over those medicines as if they meant nothing to him, which makes him even more absurd. The captain is surprised and says that this is an extremely urgent matter, asking his subordinates to report everything they know about the protagonist to their superiors, and also to the Hunters Guild, and they need to do it immediately. The 2 guards run off to report it. Karen is the daughter of one of the highest-ranking ducal houses in the nobility. Nina is a descendant of the founding bloodline of the ancient Holy Church. And lastly, Remy is the daughter of the leader who oversees countless commercial organizations. The protagonist had been speaking normally with the 3 of them, known as the 3 Great Ones, even outside that city. Besides that, he ignored any reward even after using a universal elixir that could be exchanged for a fortune. On top of everything, he is also a proven conqueror, carrying an item from a level 8 dungeon. In other words, that man is, without a doubt, a member of the secret organization under the direct control of the Empire, also known as the Vertar Peacekeeping Force. While the protagonist is walking through the city, he thinks that it really looks the same as, or even better than, the one from the game, because it is exactly identical. He can see the Treasure Hunters Guild from there. He takes a deep breath, thinking that he would like to walk around a little more and look at everything. However, he is already at his physical limit. Besides that, he does not like the way everyone is looking at him at all. He looks at a young man in the street and asks if there is a problem, but the young man gets scared and says no. Even though everyone might think they would see several people in armor if they went to the central district, he had put on that equipment to increase his combat ability a little. Since it is a rare item, it is somewhat natural that it is attracting so much attention. Because of that, it is better for him to go straight to his inn. But suddenly, he hears a shout saying that he is amazing. A little girl runs up to him and hugs his leg. A short while later, Karen had already arrived at her home, and her father could not believe that she had returned safely, because he was very happy to see her back and unharmed. She asked him not to cry so much, since he has already been holding her for several minutes. He asked her to let him, at least for now, stay hugging her, because he had been very worried. He tries to compose himself and apologizes, saying that she is right and that apparently her leg really was cured thanks to the universal elixir. After all, first he had heard that she had returned safely, but even her leg had been completely cured. Even after years of using his influence, he had never managed to obtain a medicine like that. And that man simply pulled out a universal elixir as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Karen says that, without hesitating for even a second when she tried to thank him, the protagonist even had the nerve to tell her to pay him another day. It is not as if he did not know that she is the daughter of a duke. Her father holds a letter in his hands saying that he would like to confirm a few things. The person who saved them introduced himself as an intelligence agent and rescued all of them by himself. Karen is surprised, asking if it was not her father who had sent him to save them. The duke takes a deep breath, saying no, because if he had connections with someone like the protagonist, he would have obtained the elixir for her a long time ago. He points out that the protagonist probably told that story to give them emotional comfort until they could get home. Karen asks why he saved them, since Nina and Remy also knew nothing about him. The Duke says that perhaps it is because he is an intelligence agent. She says that the protagonist probably already had information about the criminal group known as Red Freed. Her father says that it is still unclear whether the protagonist's mission was to capture the bandits or rescue them, and now all they can do is hope it was not the former. Otherwise, he failed his true mission in order to save the three of them. Karen asks if they are really just going to hope, because the proper thing would be to send an official letter of thanks to the organization he belongs to, since they need to help however they can. Her father says that if they do that, they will only end up putting a noose around the protagonist's neck, because his punishment will probably be even worse, since an intelligence agent, by nature, is someone whose identity must never be revealed. Karen is surprised and asks if that means her father knows which organization the protagonist belongs to. The Duke says yes, because a message arrived 2 days ago saying that the group of bandits had been captured near the city of Wafer. Karen is surprised because the protagonist really knew that the enemies were there, which is why he took a detour. Her father slaps the letter down on the table, saying that now he understands everything and that the protagonist's origin is exactly what he suspected. After all, it has not been confirmed yet, but the group that captured Red Freed appears to be the unit under the direct control of the Empire known as Vertar. Karen is even more surprised, asking if her father is talking about the real Vertar. This is a secret organization under the direct control of the imperial capital, tasked with maintaining public order. It is said to be composed mainly of the best treasure hunters, an elite among elites. Her father says yes, it is exactly that same organization that all criminal groups fear. Besides that, it is possible that within Vertar, the protagonist holds a commanding position and has authorization to act alone. He holds his daughter by the shoulders and asks her to listen very carefully, because she must not reveal the protagonist's true identity to anyone. Since he said he was an intelligence agent to calm them down and make the rescue easier, they must not betray that good intention in any way. Karen, still a little frightened by this whole story, tells her father that she understands. In addition, the Duke points out that it goes without saying, but they must repay that debt as much as possible, and while the protagonist is still in that city, their only option is to find him by his pitch-black equipment. He asks her to go call Lithia because if they happen to find the protagonist, he wants the two of them to invite him there. The Duke sits in his chair and takes a deep breath while thinking that this is not something he should wish for, but it would be ideal if the protagonist were someone considered a pillar of the organization, because if he has a very high position, he should have enough influence not to be punished so severely. The man who saved his daughter is honorable, and because of that, he swears that he will repay this debt even if it takes a decade. He thinks that the Ansaj family and the Alblera family will certainly reach the same conclusion. The next day, near lunchtime, the protagonist is in the city dining hall savoring some delicious meat. The attendant there laughs, saying that he is very happy to hear that. He changes the subject, saying that he knows it is a bit too nosy to ask, but he needs to know if the protagonist is the guy who is wearing that black armor. Kai only laughs, and the attendant understands immediately, saying that he knew it. When he first saw the protagonist, he was scared to death, but he is polite and different from the others, since many treasure hunters in that city are always showing off and picking fights all the time. The attendant asks if the protagonist is from out of town, and he says yes, from very far away. Suddenly, a knight opens the door asking for permission because he has a question. He introduces himself and asks if anyone wearing equipment as black as night has passed through that establishment. Both the receptionist and the protagonist are surprised, looking at each other's faces. Kai gets scared and asks the receptionist to try to hide him, but the receptionist tells him to stop talking nonsense, because that is one of the Duke's soldiers. The knight asks again, and the protagonist says that if there is any trouble, he will take the blame, and the receptionist can say that he was the one who told him to do it. The receptionist takes a deep breath and says that, unfortunately, no one has passed through there. The guard thanks him for the information and leaves the establishment. The receptionist yells at the protagonist, asking who he is after all. Suddenly, another person interrupts the two of them, saying that she has a question and asks if anyone wearing black equipment came to stay there. The receptionist is frightened, because that woman is from the Holy Church, But the protagonist continues asking for the same thing. The receptionist ends up agreeing and says that unfortunately no one came there wearing those clothes. The woman from the holy church thanks him for his time and leaves. Soon after, another person enters, apologizing and asks if anyone wearing black armor has entered there. The receptionist was already irritated and the protagonist kept asking him to do the same thing. So the receptionist gave the same answer. As soon as the last person left, the receptionist asked the protagonist what exactly he had done, since those three big shots known as the three great ones were looking for him. Kai said that even he did not know and that maybe he had done something absurd without realizing it. The receptionist scolded the protagonist, saying that this was not something simple to ignore, so he needed to go resolve it before it was too late. Kai, still frightened by the fact that he was being searched for by the three great ones, began wondering what he should do. Meanwhile, inside her room, Karen was explaining to her sister that everything was fine now and that she was not overexerting herself. But her sister continued asking if she was sure she was not pushing herself too hard and whether her foot, along with her leg, was no longer hurting. Karen emphasized that she had already said that the day before because she was doing very well. But even so, she was happy and thanked her sister again for taking such good care of her. Lifia said that she was very happy to see her sister's leg getting better, but she was also a little sad that their daily routine was coming to an end, because she had really enjoyed spending that time with her sister. Karen wondered how they still had not managed to find someone so conspicuous since they had obtained information that the protagonist had been carrying a child. Lifia pointed out that at this rate, they would not be able to thank him at all. Karen said that the protagonist was definitely preventing anyone from finding out where he was. Her sister agreed, saying that their father had told her everything. Karen asked if her sister thought the protagonist might be being held responsible for using that universal elixir. Lifia knew exactly how her sister was feeling, but all they could do at the moment was hope that it was being resolved quietly. Karen got a little angry because the protagonist had fooled her perfectly, speaking that way and saying it was his personal stock just to make it easier for them to use it without worrying. Lifia said that now that she understood the protagonist a little better, he had probably also wanted to hide the fact that he belonged to an organization like that. Karen took a deep breath, hoping that he would not suffer any kind of heavy punishment. Lifia laughed at her sister, saying that it was rare to see her so downcast. Karen emphasized that the protagonist himself had gone alone to save them, so it did not matter whether she was acting that way or not. Her sister kept laughing, saying that she had never said it was a bad thing. Karen became even angrier. Her sister explained that Marie and Palka had said the same thing, which showed that the man really was incredible. He had risked his own life to save them, even knowing that he could be held responsible by the organization. Karen asked when her sister had met him. She pointed out that it had only been for about an hour, but Nina and Remy had apparently told very similar stories. Besides that, they had said that they wanted to thank him as soon as possible and wanted to see him again. Karen said that even so, she was still the one who thought about the protagonist the most. Her sister laughed again and asked her not to get so obsessed with it. Karen said that she was not obsessed with anything. Meanwhile, at the lodging house, the attendant said that, to be very honest, he did not think the protagonist had done anything wrongs. But if he kept hiding where he was, it would become increasingly difficult to stay there. Rumors were spreading everywhere, and the search for him was becoming very intense. The protagonist pointed out that if there were no other suspects at this point, then obviously only he remained. The attendant agreed, saying that he was the only person who fit. Kai asked what kind of punishment he could expect if those rumors were true. The attendant pointed out that even if it were the lightest punishment, the protagonist would probably be forbidden from setting foot in that city again. If the three great ones joined forces, that would not be difficult for them at all. The receptionist pointed out that continuing to hide the protagonist also weighed on his conscience. But despite all that, he still wanted to give him some advice, asking him not to change ends, because a rumor was already circulating that the person who managed to report where the protagonist was hiding would receive a total of 3 million. Kai was surprised by that amount and asked the attendant why he still had not reported him. The receptionist explained that after going this far in hiding the protagonist, it was too late for that. Besides, Kai was probably some important big shot because it seemed more like the three great ones were trying not to draw too much attention, so he must have a reason for acting that way. The protagonist tried to explain that, in truth, he was not anyone that important, but the receptionist did not believe him. The protagonist said that, either way, tomorrow he should put on his equipment again and leave the city before something worse happened, but even so, he needed to take advantage of today to relax. The attendant said that was a great idea and asked him to enjoy himself a little. He began walking, thinking that even if he was expelled from that city tomorrow, at least he would be satisfied that he had enjoyed it while he could. He looked at the clock tower and remembered climbing it once, around that same time, and since he was already there, he could stop by one last time. But before entering, he paid the entrance fee and realized that it was still as absurd as ever. But since he might be banned tomorrow, even though it was expensive, he would still accept it. As soon as he paid and went up, he came across a woman and was surprised. He greeted her, and she greeted him back. The protagonist stood beside her, thinking that there had been a rumor in the game that a mysterious character could be found inside the clock tower, but there was no way that the mysterious character from the game was standing right in front of him, so it was better for him to stay a little alert for now. The two continued looking out the window, and she told the protagonist that it was a wonderful view and perfect for clearing one's mind. The protagonist agreed. She asked why he was in a place like that. Kai explained that it was for the same reason, because he needed to cool his head a little. She laughed, saying that she understood, and asked if he knew the man who wore black equipment. The protagonist was a little surprised and frightened by the question and said yes, since he had become quite the hot topic lately. The girl said that many people were looking for him, including herself, because she would very much like to meet him in person. The protagonist was surprised by the word meet and asked if that man had done something wrong. The mysterious woman said no, emphasizing that the man was not being searched for because of anything he had done wrong. Kai asked why he was being searched for, so the girl apologized and said that part was confidential. The protagonist agreed, saying that was very fair and thought that just knowing he was not being searched for because of something bad was already enough. She looked down and saw that her carriage had arrived. She said goodbye, saying that her escort had just arrived. Kai tried to talk to her a little more, but ended up feeling embarrassed. She laughed, saying that perhaps they would make good progress very soon, and thanked him once again for his concern. But the protagonist still did not know exactly who that woman was. Outside, Lifia was happy to see that her sister had come to pick her up that night. Karen said that if she went out like that, maybe they could find the protagonist, but her sister no longer seemed so happy about it because apparently she was only an extra in that story. Karen said that her sister was not an extra at all because the two of them were very important. Lifia laughed and apologized. As soon as the two entered the carriage, Karen said that the mask was very embarrassing. Her sister said that even so, she was still very happy to see her little sister coming to pick her up. Lifia pointed out that besides that, she had met someone in the clock tower just a little while ago for the first time. Karen said that was a little strange, and perhaps the person had heard the rumors and gone there to investigate. Lifia explained that at first she had also been on alert, but after talking to him, she realized that was not the case, because that man had even spoken to her in a way that normally no one would dare, and it had been a very special moment. But just in case, she had also asked that boy whether he knew anything about the man wearing black equipment. But as expected, she could not get any information. Karen said that, unfortunately, she had not managed to get any information either, and their father thought that perhaps the protagonist had already left the city. If that were the case, the gate guards would have informed them. Lifia began thinking and said that the person she had met in the clock tower had said something very significant. Karen became alert and asked her sister what kind of person that visitor had been. Lifia said that he was a very charming man, with a scar over his eye and a calm aura. Karen asked if the scar was on the left side. Her sister thought for a moment and emphasized that it was exactly on the left side. Karen shouted for the carriage driver to return to the clock tower immediately. Lifia was a little startled and asked her sister if she was sure about that. Karen explained that the protagonist also had a scar near his left eye, so there was a real chance that it was him. Lifia gets angry and asks why she had not told her that before. Karen explains that it was a secret between her and their father. The more people know what he looks like, the harder his job becomes. A short while later, they arrive at the clock tower and she runs out of the carriage, but as soon as she reaches the top, he is no longer there. At the Treasure Hunters Guild, Garag, the guild master of the Aldea branch of the Treasure Hunters Guild, was going crazy, questioning why there was no hunter information about the protagonist and just how restricted that information was. 3 days earlier, they had received a report from the gate guards. A man wearing black equipment, very likely a member of Vertar, was in the city. He had rescued the daughters of the 3 Great Ones from the Red Freed group all by himself, and, either alone or with the help of companions, had also captured the entire group of bandits. They did not know exactly how the information about the kidnapping had ended up spreading, but attacking a city under the direct influence of the Empire was practically the same as attacking the Empire itself. Because of that, it was entirely plausible for Vertar to be sent, and the more he investigated, the more that theory made sense. Garag had said that no one should make contact with the Absolute Black. That was what he had told all the hunters. However, someone ended up running into him in the city while he was carrying a child. He even carried her in his arms. Still, if his mission had already ended, the guildmaster would be very grateful if he returned to the capital. Suddenly, a woman bursts in, calling for the guildmaster and saying that they have a problem. She says that someone they believe to be the Absolute Black has just entered the guild. Garag cannot believe that his problems never end. As soon as he goes to the reception area, the protagonist is standing there in his armor. He greets him and welcomes him to the Treasure Hunters Guild. Some people start laughing so hard they are almost crying when the guildmaster speaks so politely like that, and it is actually funny. Garage gets angry because they have no idea what is really happening there. Garage thanks him for visiting. Kai points out that he's only there to take a look around. The guildmaster asks why he came to take a look around, but the protagonist asks if he has done something wrong. Garage gets scared and says no. However, the guildmaster thinks that taking a look around is reconnaissance disguised as a casual visit, and if he is going to lie, then he at least needs to do it better. But he notices that the protagonist's posture is a little different, and perhaps he has already realized that the guild knows who he is. So he decided to come there to bluff, and that knowledge and attitude show that this guy is, in fact, on another level. After all, Garag had always dreamed of joining Vertar someday, but no matter how much fame he accumulated, he was never recruited. But now that he has managed to see a member up close, he understands. They are true monsters, with completely unknown strength and abilities. Kai says that since he is only there to take a look around, he would like to see the guildmaster's office and asks if that is all right. The guildmaster says yes, and with that, the two of them start heading there. Some of the hunters watching this do not feel very comfortable, and one of them asks the others what they think. Another says that he looked far too open, as if he were waiting for someone to pick a fight with him. The girl begins trembling in fear, saying that even the guild master needs to act with that level of respect, which means that if that guy goes out of control, they will not be able to stop him. Another young man agrees, saying that they do not stand the slightest chance, while the green-haired one says that he would really like to know who would win, the absolute black or that rank S monster. One misunderstanding leads to another, spreading like a chain reaction, and the protagonist has no idea that other people are making his situation more and more absurd. A short while later, Kai thanks Garag for all his help, and the master asks him to come back again. But the protagonist is frightened because he did not think the Treasure Hunters Association would be such a terrifying place, so he will not go back there again. Besides, he thought there was a chance the people looking for him would find him, because the whole time, he thought he was going to a place where he would not attract so much attention. But with that armor, everyone stares at him as if he were a murderer. In the game, the guildmaster had a way of speaking that matched his appearance. He was not supposed to be as polite as he had been. Besides, he also did not understand why he was treated like an important person. But even so, he thinks it was an excellent experience. As he walks down the street, he does not know exactly what he should do now because he cannot go visit tourist spots while wearing that armor. Suddenly, a carriage stops beside him, and Karen jumps out, shouting that she has finally managed to find him. The protagonist thinks that if he is not mistaken, she is a noble, and that emblem on the carriage is the crest of a ducal house. Karen, irritated, scolds him, asking where he had been hiding because she looked for him everywhere. The protagonist explains that he was at the lodging house. Karen points out that they never heard anything about that. The protagonist says that he had asked the owner for a favor. The two stare at each other for a while, and she eventually calms down, pointing out that this is just like the protagonist. Kai asks what exactly she means by that, but she says it is nothing because it is probably something he cannot talk about. Leafia also gets out of the carriage and asks her sister how things are going, but as soon as the protagonist hears her voice and sees the color of her hair, he is surprised. Leafia apologizes for the late greeting and introduces herself, saying her name. She points out that she does not know how to properly express her gratitude for what he did, because words alone are not enough. She says that she does not know if this is too sudden, but she would like to know whether he has a little free time that day. Kai asks what happens if he says yes. Karen explains that she will take him to her house and properly thank him. The protagonist says that if that is the case, then he is very busy. Karen and Leafia are confused, and the protagonist thinks that even if he is the savior of a noble's daughter, acting rudely could still lead to his execution. The two sisters look at each other and cling to the protagonist's arms. In sweet voices, they tell him not to say such things and beg him to let them thank him at least a little since they have prepared a comfortable carriage to take him there. With a request like that, he ends up giving in, and inside the carriage he looks at them and thinks that he feels as if he is being deceived. Leafia says that she is very grateful that he allowed her to fulfill her duty by accepting this gratitude, because failing to do so would be unacceptable for those involved and would damage the reputation of the entire family. The protagonist ends up agreeing, saying that actually makes a little sense, but he still does not really understand what is happening there. Karen says that there is something she would very much like to ask while the protagonist is still there. Kai points out that it is even a little scary to hear her speaking so formally. She starts shouting, saying that he is being very rude, but since he is asking, she will speak normally. The protagonist says that he prefers her the way she was before and asks what she would like to know. Karen gets straight to the point and says that when the protagonist saved the three of them, he used several of those legendary elixirs. Because of that, she would like to know whether he ended up harming himself because of it, since that would be the reason he was hiding in that city. The protagonist does not understand how that could harm him and says that actually, no. To begin with, all those potions are his. The two of them are still surprised by that answer. Karen keeps insisting, asking whether the protagonist is not bothered by carrying all of that alone, because perhaps the two of them could help him if he could at least explain the situation. Things would become easier, but Kai is completely lost, asking himself why he cannot follow their reasoning, which makes him wonder how he could convince them that he really is fine. He decides to say that he does not regret what he did for even a single second, and if her legs were healed because of his actions, then he is satisfied. And instead of worrying about him, he would be happy if they enjoyed themselves and did everything they could not do before, because he can take care of his own problems. The two of them are enchanted by that speech and look at each other. Lifia begins to laugh and also calls Kai master, saying that there truly are no words to express how grateful she is. The protagonist thinks that the speech was somehow effective. He changes the subject, saying that he has a request for the two of them. Lifia asks what it is, and the protagonist explains that when he meets her father, who is a duke, if he happens to say something rude that makes her father angry, they must step in and intervene immediately. If they do that, he will not demand any payment for the medicine. Karen asks if he is serious and if the price he wants for that legendary medicine is only that. Kai says that he is very serious because he is just an ordinary person, and authority is what scares him the most. Kai thinks that nothing matters more than making sure he stays alive. The two of them remain surprised. Lifia quietly tells her sister that even for someone hiding his true identity, that was a terrible excuse. Karen agrees, saying that the story was very poorly told. She tells the protagonist that she understands, but she would like to point out that she does not think there is any way the protagonist could make her father angry, no matter what he says. Lifia agrees with what her sister just said. The protagonist says that helps a lot and that he feels much calmer now. Karen asks if he is going to stay in that armor the entire time. The protagonist looks at his armor and says that maybe it would be rude if he did not take it off, but she points out that that is not exactly what she meant, because it looks like very heavy armor, so maybe it is bothering him. Lifia says that personally she would very much like to see the face behind that armor. Karen asks her sister to stop being so rude, but that request surprises the protagonist. Lifia thinks that the protagonist is a very honest person. He is not arrogant, nor does he look down on others. Although he is a man of few words, he is difficult to read. He must be on alert to protect them if something happens, and now she can understand why her sister liked that man so much. Unlike other treasure hunters, the more fame they gain, the more they become targets of envy. As a result, many of them begin acting arrogantly and showing off their presence. But the protagonist, even though he probably has more power and fame than anyone else, remains humble. He overpowered that cruel criminal organization and risked his life to save her younger sister. Because of that, she is in no position to hold her head high since her debt to him is enormous, yet he still never takes advantage of that. This makes her wonder just how admired he must be by the people around him. Kai says that he is getting a little nervous. Karen asks how he can say that with that face. The protagonist says that it is a shame she was saved by someone as dull as him. Karen says that is completely different because she is not that ungrateful. Lifia simply keeps laughing, thinking that although the protagonist must be part of the imperial capital's secret organization, he is still saying that he is getting nervous about standing before a duke, and he probably only said that to tease Karen a little. As the daughter of a duke, she frequently deals with other nobles because of the difference in age and also because they are seeking marriage. None of them has ever spent time with Karen. Of course, those circumstances could not be helped, but the way the protagonist treats her sister makes her feel happier than she has ever felt in her life. Lifia wanted to meet the protagonist no matter what, but her sister wanted it even more. Besides that, Kai chose to get into the carriage so as not to damage the duke's reputation. He even tried to give up the debt for the legendary medicine they had spent years searching for, simply asking her to intervene if he angered their father. A medicine capable of curing any illness, whose value is comparable to the construction of a castle, was simply given away for free. This makes her wonder whether there really is anyone else as generous as him in that world. Lifia is trying to find some way to maintain a connection with him from then on. She asks him how long he plans to remain in that city because, if he is interested, she can arrange a residence for him at any time. Kai says that it depends entirely on his mood. Lifia thinks that the protagonist probably means that it depends only on the orders that come from above, because just by him moving, lives can be saved, just like her sister's life. So perhaps the request she is making is very selfish of her. A short while later, they finally arrive at Karen's house. A warm reception has been prepared for him, and as soon as the carriage door opens, everyone welcomes him to the Duke's residence. Kai is impressed and asks why they did all of that. Leafia explains that this is her family's way of showing respect. The protagonist gets out of the carriage, saying that they did not need to go that far because he feels that problems might arise if people with such high status start acting that way toward him. The protagonist extends his hand to help her down from the carriage. Lifia explains that this was a mutual decision, so there are no problems. And if anyone objects to it, they can take immediate measures, because failing to show respect is a serious offense to them. The protagonist is a little frightened, but says that he understands. He also helps Karen down from the carriage, while thinking that it feels as if someone is about to be severely punished. The headmaid calls the protagonist Lord, saying that they had been eagerly awaiting his arrival. The captain of the guard says that they are honored to have him there and that they are sincerely grateful. The maid says that the master and mistress are waiting for them in the other room and that she will guide them there. Karen asks him to enjoy himself, and her sister thanks him for accepting the invitation. Kai asks what the two of them are going to do. Karen explains that they will have to leave for now because they would only get in the way since this is a very important conversation. Lifia says that in exchange they will be waiting in the room next door, so if anything happens, they will enter immediately. The protagonist thinks that it would be a great help if they stayed, but points out that he supposes there is no other way. Kai calls the captain and says that he does not know exactly how to say this, but it would be very good if he kept that sword for him. The captain of the guard is surprised and asks if he is sure. Karen is also shocked, saying that the protagonist had not let go of it during the entire journey to the city, so it must be something very important. Besides that, no living being inside that house thinks the protagonist will betray them. Kai insists on handing over his sword, telling the captain that it is not as if he is taking everyone's weapons, and given his position, it is only natural for him to be suspicious. He adds that besides that, he is extremely stronger when fighting hand-to-hand, so it is not as if he cannot fight without his sword. Everyone is impressed, and the captain says that he will make sure to take care of that weapon with the utmost care. Kai thinks that this was not a joke. Ever since he was reincarnated into a character with abilities different from the ones he used in the game, he had tried using weapons. As he expected, he could not move freely like before, and it was easy to imagine being hit first and taking a fatal attack before he could even act. That is why, instead of fighting with weapons, he feels much more confident fighting hand-to-hand. So handing over the weapon is not that much of a problem, but now he will no longer be able to escape. People with that much power are terrifying to him. The headmaid asks the protagonist to follow her because they are going in now. He thinks that all he can do now is hope that things go smoothly. One of the great supreme blades, the black sword Dullagand, is a blade that never breaks or loses its edge, no matter what it faces. The only problem is that the luck stat becomes unstable. The protagonist says that if they are interested in that weapon, they can examine it under the supervision of the head guard. After that, he enters the house, and Karen runs over to the sword saying that she wants to see that weapon, because she has been curious about that blade for a very long time, since it really is beautiful. The captain of the guard feels a little uncomfortable, but decides to show it to her. As he draws the sword from its sheath, it shines like a precious stone. However, he thinks that it does not look very durable. Karen, still impressed, asks the head guard what kind of fighting style he thinks the protagonist uses. The captain points out that, judging by the light armor, he does not seem like someone who relies on brute strength. So, if he had to guess, he would say that he is the type who overwhelms his opponent with speed, reading their movements. Karen says that this is the most troublesome opponent she can imagine. The captain hands the sword to her, asking her to hold it with both hands as firmly as possible. As soon as she holds it, he says that he is going to let go. Karen says that the sword is very heavy, causing her to lose her balance. The sword touches the floor, and even though it was only a gentle touch, it was still enough to instantly create a cut, leaving the three of them surprised. Realizing how powerful that sword is, Karen hands it back to the captain, who stares at it and thinks that cutting stone with such a light strike, as if it had barely touched it, while the blade does not even have a single scratch, shows that not even armor would be able to withstand that cutting edge. He sheaths the sword again, thinking that he had heard the protagonist's story but had doubted that he belonged to Vertar. However, seeing that he possesses such a terrifying weapon, handles it so easily, and is still said to be stronger unarmed, demonstrates just how frightening that man really is. The captain asks if Karen is all right, and even while trembling, she says yes. Lifia points out that they need to report this directly to their father, and the captain agrees. Meanwhile, the two of them were sitting outside the room, listening to the conversation. Karen tells her sister that she already knew. Lifia interrupts and says that they did not let them accompany him because they were dealing with Kai. However, she was able to tell from his voice and posture alone that he was bowing deeply, to preserve his dignity as a duke, so that he would not be looked down upon or expose his weakness. He always carries himself as the one in authority. Karen, still upset about the situation, tells her older sister that now she can no longer face her mother or father because she never thought they would go so far as to make the protagonist bow. Lifia realizes that her sister is truly sad and asks if she really thinks she has time to feel discouraged. Karen is surprised by that comment and asks what her sister is really saying. Lifia explains to her sister that first of all, there is the matter of her cutting those carefully selected stones in the street, so she needs to explain that. Karen realizes that she always ends up causing problems, but her sister says that perhaps she will end up being praised as a swordmaster. Karen points out that there is no chance of that happening, since she did not use any strength at all. It was all because that sword is extremely powerful. However, she realizes that there is no escape and takes a deep breath, saying that she will become an exemplary daughter in every aspect and make up for all the trouble she ended up causing. Lifia asks her to remember what the protagonist said because she needs to do what she could not do before and enjoy life to the fullest. So she has no time to be depressed. Karen becomes happy, and her sister continues saying that the protagonist tried to hide it, but she must not forget that he was the one who healed her legs, most likely at the risk of angering the emperor. They continued listening to some of the conversation. Their father said that he truly wanted to thank the protagonist, and the lady said that she was prepared to fulfill any request with complete sincerity. Karen pointed out that she had been wondering for quite some time why the protagonist would not accept any reward. Lifia explained that to him, saving people was probably something normal. Karen, still confused, thought that someone who refused a reward as generous as the one they were offering was not a normal person. Her sister agreed, but the reward of a duke was extremely valuable. It could be titles, lands, mansions, or enough wealth to live a life of luxury. Even marriage arrangements could happen, and almost any realistic wish could be granted. However, she still thought there was the matter of the clock tower. She really wanted to know if there was any way to see his face again. Karen hoped her sister would not see the protagonist before her, since it seemed like she was very obsessed with him and, at this rate, might end up wanting to keep him all to herself. Lifia was surprised and said that she had never planned anything like that. Karen asked her sister to tell the truth, because if that happened, then maybe she could describe what the protagonist looked like, aside from the scar. The two stared at each other, waiting to see who would make the first move. Lifia explained that she was not trying to keep the protagonist all to herself, and that the only thing she felt was curiosity about him. Karen thought it would be better not to let her sister see him. Lifia got angry and asked why. At that exact moment, the Duke and the lady were a little anxious. Duke Digote was standing before the man clad in armor as dark as his title, Shikoku, and he kept acting in completely unexpected ways. Digote could not understand why the protagonist was being so kind to them, since it was his family that owed everything to that man, who acted humbly as if he were trying to preserve the Duke's dignity. After all, the protagonist was treating them with the same level of respect that they were treating him with. Digote still thought there was no reason for Kai to be so generous, because he had not made a single demand. Besides that, he probably knew that he was in a position where he could demand basically anything, and also knew that they were in no position to refuse. The Duke thought that, since the protagonist was someone connected to the Emperor, he was certainly in a higher position than they were, so there was no reason for him to act so humbly, and he must have some kind of backing they could never hope to oppose. Normally, anyone would simply accept gratitude, especially if they were a treasure hunter. Besides, if the protagonist really wanted to hide his current position, then it would be better for him to discreetly accept their thanks. Digote looked at his wife, thinking that perhaps they were being tested. However, the impression he had of the protagonist was better than that of anyone else he had ever met, even though he could not see his true expression. But Kai was basically a void. Nothing escaped from him, making him impossible to read. Digote felt as if the protagonist were observing every movement and every word he made, evaluating how he, as a duke, dealt with someone in a position equal to the protagonist's. But he did not know exactly what he should do, because if he sent the protagonist away without doing anything, that would certainly damage his family's honor and raise rumors. Being treated that way made the Duke realize it even more clearly. Not everyone accepts gratitude for the value it appears to have, and perhaps he was being led to see his own flaws because the protagonist did not leave a single opening. Kai had even used a legendary medicine to save his daughter's leg and left no opening that could bring ruin to the family. That meant he had not only saved the Duke's daughter, but was also forcing the Duke to face his own flaws, and that was pathetic. However, Digote thought that he should not remain trapped by that because he truly believed that meeting the legendary Shikoku was a blessing. Digote pointed out that what he was about to say might be a somewhat inconvenient request, but it involved the honor of his family, and he begged the protagonist to allow them to make an offer. Kai was surprised by the request, said that he understood and agreed, saying that they could do something, but it had to be within reason. The lady asked him not to be so humble because the honor of thanking him belonged entirely to them. Digote took a deep breath and said that he would like to offer 3 things as thanks: a house they owned, a monetary reward, and the full official support of the Duke's family. The protagonist was surprised, but Digote and his wife bowed, begging him to accept. Digote thought that his judgment had not been wrong, because from the protagonist's point of view, that house would become a base in Vental, and from their side it would allow them to create a connection with someone linked to the capital. Kai took the Duke's hand, saying that, in that case, he would accept with gratitude. Digote thought that he had finally managed to give the right answer. He pointed out that if the protagonist had some free time today, he would very much like to ask his daughters to guide him through his new house. Kai accepted again and thanked him for his consideration. Digote asked his wife to take the protagonist to the room next door, where his daughters were. She called Lord Shikoku and asked him to follow her. As the protagonist left the room, Digote maintained his posture, but as soon as he was gone, he began trembling, saying that his daughter had indeed been saved by a fabulous man. The protagonist also thought that the conversation had been very intense, but Karen did not see it the same way because that was not what she had felt. Kai said that maybe it was because of the armor he was wearing. Lifia saw an opportunity and laughed, telling him to feel free to take it off if he wanted to. Karen said that might help, but asked whether the protagonist did not think he should act a little more appropriately. He was confused, asking what would be appropriate, and she said that anyone would be very happy to receive a reward from her father. Kai said that he actually was very happy and thought that he had been almost out of money. In truth, he was even a little startled to see such a huge reward simply fall into his hands, and if he had been alone, he would have celebrated like a madman. Lifia called out to the protagonist, saying that perhaps this was not the best question, but even so, she needed to know if he was truly satisfied with that reward because he could still ask for much more. Kai thought that he did not really understand the part about official support, but as for the house and the money, it was very good. He said that this was an agreement made by the adults, so they should not worry about it. And the most important thing now was to know whether the two of them were all right with it because gifting him a house meant something more. He asked if they had no attachment to it. Lifia said that he should not worry because they were only attached to the main residence, since they owned several houses. Karen pointed out that even so, living in that house alone could be very difficult and even dangerous. Lifia agreed, saying that if they compared the house the protagonist had just received to the main estate, his house's garden was a little smaller, but the mansion itself was practically the same size. Kai was surprised because that did not sound like a place for one person to live alone. Karen agreed, saying that it was indeed far too large for just one person. The protagonist thought that nobility really was on another level, something he could never have imagined. Karen asked if he planned to live there with someone or use that house as a base. Kai explained that he was thinking of using it as something like a base and, for now, intended to live alone. They continued asking if he really had no intention of living there with anyone, because a treasure hunter of his level should not be single. The protagonist said that, for now, there was no one like that. Lifia was surprised, asking if he had no interest in romance. But the protagonist said that it was not exactly like that. Karen told her sister that this was that thing about not finding someone on his level and maybe he was being a little full of himself. Kai tried to steer around the subject, saying that he might be away a little often, but they could feel free to visit the house whenever they wanted because if they did, then it would not be a problem for him. The two were surprised, asking if he was telling the truth and if it was really all right for them to visit him. Kai said that he could even give them a spare key. That way, they could enter whenever they wanted, even when he was not there. Since the house was very large, his private space would not be affected, even if they came in whenever they wanted. After all, if no one showed up, maybe even ghosts would start living in a house that big. Karen became very excited, saying that she would visit him as often as she wanted. Lifia also did not miss the opportunity and said that she would go there frequently as well. The protagonist agreed and said that was a great idea, asking them to take him to his new house. Lifia, who had free time, agreed to do it right away. Her sister also became excited to see the new house. Lifia tried to reassure Kai and explained that it was merely a symbol of her family's gratitude, so she asked him not to feel guilty about accepting it. Even so, upon entering the new house, the protagonist is completely impressed. He carefully looks around the place and realizes that even the furniture and tableware are of the highest quality. So he begins to wonder if perhaps accepting such a magnificent house like that had been a problem. Seeing his reaction, Karen comments that Kai is strangely humble sometimes, especially considering the casual way he usually speaks to her. Kai becomes embarrassed and replies that this is a different matter. After taking a better look at the mansion, Kai notices that the girls are still standing and quickly apologizes, telling them to sit down. Even though that mansion had been given to him, the protagonist makes it clear that he wants the two of them to feel comfortable and see that place as their own home. Upon hearing this, Karen becomes thoughtful and starts to find his attitude strange. She realizes that Kai asked her to sit down and wonders if he was trying to be kind, perhaps because of her leg, which had recently been healed. Kai comments that children should not overexert themselves. The girl immediately gets irritated and snaps back, saying that she is not a child. Even so, the protagonist maintains his composure and explains that he did not use that medicine on her just so she could now overdo herself. Inside, Kai begins to imagine the problem that could cause. If rumors spread saying that he was making the Duke's daughter overexert herself right after healing her, it would all be over for him. Leafia simply watches the scene and lets out a small laugh. Since Karen still does not want to sit on the sofa, Kai tries to solve the situation in a simple way and asks that if she hates the sofa so much, why does she not sit on his armor instead? To the protagonist, that was a perfect solution, since between a soft sofa and solid black armor, anyone would obviously choose the sofa. However, Karen interprets the suggestion in a different way. She approaches and replies that, in that case, sitting on the armor works too. Kai is left speechless for a moment. Karen actually accepts the suggestion, leaving the protagonist completely nervous inside the armor. Not knowing how to react, he asks what she thinks she is doing. The girl replies that he was the one who asked if she wanted to sit down. Kai becomes even more embarrassed and explains that it was clearly a joke, then tries to confirm whether she is not uncomfortable sitting on top of that armor. Seeing Karen sitting there, Leafia teases her sister and comments that it ended up being quite convenient for her. Karen becomes embarrassed and immediately tries to deny it, saying that it is not as if she is happy about the situation. But Leafia simply replies, with a smile, that she had not even asked if she was happy. The girl becomes even more irritated by the teasing. She changes the subject, asking why he keeps wearing that armor, since this is now his house. Because of that, in her view, Kai should at least make himself more comfortable. Kai justifies it, saying that he is wearing the armor only as a precaution in case something happens. But inside, he admits that he would honestly prefer to take it off. The problem is that showing his face to Lady Leafia at that moment would be far too embarrassing, especially after what happened at the clock tower. Remembering that situation, the protagonist becomes even more uncomfortable and thinks that he needs to find a way to change the subject quickly. While trying to change the mood, Kai ends up raising his hand and patting Karen on the head. The girl is surprised at once, but soon realizes what he is doing and becomes completely irritated. Embarrassed, she complains that he should not pat her on the head, emphasizing that she already told him to stop treating her like a child. Kai tries to put an end to Karen's stubbornness and tells her to sit on the sofa before he is forced to make her, but the girl immediately refuses, leaving the protagonist unable to understand why she insists on it so much. Leifia simply watches the situation with an awkward smile while Kai tries to change the subject. He comments that, even so, the Duke was quite bold to leave everything in the hands of the two of them. Hearing this, Leifia turns her attention to him and asks what exactly he means by that. Kai explains that he found it strange that the Duke would leave that kind of responsibility in the hands of the two of them, since normally he would assign a trusted man to handle it. He remembers that, even though he saved Karen, the Duke still does not know his true identity, and in a place like that, anything could happen. Because of that, the protagonist asks if he is wrong to think that decision was risky. Leifia replies that her father is the type of person who acts without thinking too much, so he probably simply judged Kai to be worthy of that level of trust. The young master understands the explanation, but he is still thoughtful, finding it curious to receive so much trust despite having spoken so little with the Duke. Kai concludes that the Duke's judgment probably came from his experience, since even without knowing the whole truth, he was able to trust the protagonist. Karen also reinforces that there was no reason to distrust him, especially after Kai used that elixir to help them. The protagonist acknowledges that this makes sense and admits that maybe she is right. Then, taking advantage of the conversation, Leifia calls Kai Master Shikoku and asks if he would like to join the two of them for dinner. However, the protagonist immediately refuses, saying that he will have to decline the invitation. Leifia realizes that Kai truly intends to leave and comments that he is quite a busy person. The protagonist replies that it is more or less like that. Then Karen takes the opportunity to ask that if he is going to leave the city, he at least stop by their house first and also let them know when he returns. However, Kai refuses right away, thanking her but saying that he will not do that. The direct answer catches Karen by surprise, and she immediately asks why he is refusing. Kai, in truth, feels uncomfortable meeting with the Duke, since the difference in status between them is far too great. Remembering the man offering help and saying that he could ask for anything without hesitation, the protagonist feels even more pressure because Dealing with someone in that position would bring many complications. Karen falls silent, clearly dissatisfied with his answers, but Lifia understands the situation and tries to calm her sister, saying that there is nothing they can do. Karen accepts the situation but asks that then Kai at least stay in that city for as long as he can. The protagonist agrees without any problem, saying that the city is pleasant and that he intends to stay there for a while, especially because he also wants to walk around and get to know the place better. Besides that, Kai remembers that there are still people looking for him, imagining that they are probably those too. He deduces that they must also be quite influential. At that moment, he notices a strange reaction from the girls, especially from Lifia, who seems amused by something. Karen also becomes uncomfortable and starts acting suspiciously, as if she has misunderstood something. The protagonist finds that sudden change strange and asks what that was about. Lifia becomes embarrassed right away and tries to cover it up, saying that it was nothing. Karen ends up confessing that her sister told her to try lifting Kai's helmet. Lifia panics immediately, embarrassed that she has been exposed. The protagonist is left speechless for a moment until he realizes that Lifia was trying to discover his hidden face. With that, Kai concludes that she is more persistent than she seems. Lifia, unable to defend herself, simply covers her face in shame and warns Karen that after that, she will be punished. Karen does not regret exposing Lifia and says that it is her sister's own fault. Lifia, trying to regain control of the situation, says that before anything else, Karen should get off Master Shikoku's lap since she is in the way. But the girl immediately refuses, saying that she does not want to get off. Kai becomes increasingly uncomfortable with the two of them arguing like that while she continues sitting there. Then Karen takes the opportunity to tease her even more and says that if Lifia is jealous, she should just admit it already. Lifia tries to deny Karen's teasing and becomes embarrassed. Kai notices the two girls' reactions and wonders if perhaps he is imagining things, but decides to continue. Then the protagonist comments that Miss Lifia probably should not be doing that. Upon hearing those words, Karen and Lifia react at once. Irritated, Karen stares at him and asks why he is rejecting her sister like that. Kai tries to explain that this is not what he meant. He explains his concern more clearly and says that Lifia is beautiful, has a high position, and is already nearly an adult, so she probably already has someone interested in her. Because of that, the protagonist thinks that if she got too involved with him in that way, it could end up causing misunderstandings. Karen is surprised by how directly he put the situation while Lifia responds calmly. She admits that, as Kai said, she really does receive many proposals, but then makes it clear that despite that, she is still single. Kai is surprised to learn that Lifia is still single, and comments that this was unexpected. Karen then explains that, in truth, the others are the ones who end up giving up. According to her, men fall in love with her sister, become completely embarrassed, and then say that they are too ashamed to face her again. Kai lets out an awkward laugh and comments that this sounds rather complicated. Even so, the protagonist understands how they feel, since it really is difficult to act naturally around someone so beautiful. Karen then says that deep down her sister is actually quite needy, so when she tries to get close to someone, people end up avoiding her out of embarrassment. Extremely embarrassed, Lifia asks her sister to stop while the protagonist thinks that Karen is still sitting on his lap. She then whispers for him to try tapping the sofa, and confused, he asks why. She tells him to just do it already, and Kai does not understand how that could help, but even so, he tries to follow her advice. Right after he does that, Lifia gets up and sits beside him. Karen feels satisfied with the result, asking if he saw that, as if it explained everything. But to the protagonist, the situation still makes no sense, since asking if he saw does not clarify absolutely anything. When Lifia notices the situation, she naturally moves closer and ends up touching Kai's armor, leaving Karen surprised at once. The protagonist is completely lost, not knowing what he should do in a situation like that. To break the strange atmosphere, Karen suggests that they simply continue talking. Lifia calmly replies that she would have no problem with that. But Karen notices her sister's attitude and becomes even more surprised, commenting that this is the first time she has seen Lifia go that far. Later, at the mansion, Lifia thanks Kai and says that he was a great help that day. She says the pleasure was all hers and sincerely thanks him for the precious time he dedicated to them. Then, Lifia starts talking about one of the final symbols of the family's gratitude, presenting their crest. Lifia explains that this symbol is a little complex, so it should take about 3 days to be ready. Once it is finished, she says that they will personally return to visit Kai. In addition, Lifia tells him that on that next visit, she also intends to discuss the mansion's management structure with him. Kai accepts the estimate and agrees to wait for their next visit. With that, Lifia and Karen prepare to end that meeting. Karen says goodbye to Kai and asks him to stay healthy until they meet again. Kai wishes her the same and tells Karen to go home soon so her parents can be at ease. Karen cheerfully agrees and calls Lifia to leave. Lifia then formally says goodbye, saying that they will take their leave for the day. With that, the two of them enter the carriage and leave the mansion. Kai simply accepts the farewell and, after the two leave, thinks that he will finally have a chance to take off his helmet. When he removes it, he feels great relief and becomes much more comfortable. After they part ways, Lifia and Karen continue in the carriage, and Lifia comments that time flew by during that visit. In the carriage, Karen admits that she wanted to stay longer, and Lifia agrees. Karen comments that it felt good to be called beautiful and receives so many compliments. Lifia agrees and says that she also thought it was adorable that Kai called Karen by name, making Karen a little embarrassed. After that, Lifia reflects that, while talking to him that day, she could not help but think about how Kai could be so generous, even though he had more fame than anyone else. Karen then thinks that someone probably needs to be like that to be part of Vertar. Karen notices Lifia's true intention and says that the reason she wanted to stay longer was to increase her chances of seeing Kai's face. Karen comments that she had never seen a gesture like that before, but Lifia reminds her that Kai was the one who saved her sister. Besides that, she still considers the possibility that he is the same person she met at the clock tower. Lifia thinks that she really wanted to see at least a little of Lord Shikoku's face. Noticing her expression, Karen asks her sister not to make that face and says that maybe she can draw a picture of him when they get home. Lifia thanks her for the offer, but carefully tries to say that Karen's drawings are a little too unique and might not serve as a good reference. Karen, on the other hand, thinks that her sister draws even worse than she does. In the middle of the conversation, Lifia notices that Karen is looking somewhere else and asks what caught her attention. At that moment, Karen ends up seeing Kai without his helmet, observing his face for the first time. Karen tries to call Lifia but realizes that her sister has become completely focused on Kai. Upon seeing his face, Lifia understands that that man really was the person she met at the clock tower and comments that he teased her until the very end by hiding it. Karen is surprised to hear that and asks if that means Kai really was the person Lifia met at the tower. Lifia confirms that she is certain Kai was the man from the clock tower. Then she asks Karen whether that meeting really could have been just a coincidence. Karen finds the doubt strange and says it probably was, since no one knows how much Lifia likes the view from that place. But Lifia starts considering another possibility. If Kai already knew that, then it would make sense for him to have made time in his busy schedule to be there specifically. Lifia thinks that even Karen going to pick her up at the clock tower might have been something Kai predicted, precisely so that he could check how her leg was recovering. Karen is surprised when she understands that possibility and asks if that means he had been watching over her from the beginning. Lifia says that this is the only explanation that makes sense and concludes that Kai really is a kind person. Even though he used a precious elixir on his own and probably received a reprimand from his superiors, he still did everything while thinking about Karen's recovery. Lifia recalls Kai's words when he said that he did not regret the choice he made. To him, if that medicine helped Karen's leg heal properly, then it had already been worth it. Instead of wanting her to worry about him, Kai preferred that Karen do everything she could not do before and enjoy life to the fullest. Lifia also remembers that Kai asked Karen not to push herself too hard after her recovery. With that, she interprets that he chose those words to ease Karen's guilt, speaking in a way that would not make her feel indebted. To Lifia, Kai was showing enormous consideration. She even begins to imagine that his presence at the clock tower might have been to watch the surroundings and protect them from the remnants of the group that kidnapped Karen. If all of that were true, Lifia wonders how much effort Kai really made for them. The more Lifia thinks about everything, the more possibilities begin to arise in her mind. To her, Kai may have done everything without trying to show off, without taking any action that would draw attention to himself, and without getting involved in anything that could expose him, working silently and alone. Thinking about that, Lifia concludes that he is a truly admirable man. Still affected by everything, she looks at Karen and wishes that the day after tomorrow would come soon, because now there are many things she wants to say to Kai. Karen notices Lifia's reaction and says that she has the face of a girl in love. Lifia admits that because Kai is someone who cares so much about Karen, she wants to get even closer to him. Karen simply watches that in silence while Lifia begins to wonder what their father would say if he knew how she felt. Karen thinks that, to their father, Kai is someone he could never equal. Meanwhile, Lifia continues imagining how their father would react if he discovered her feelings. Meanwhile, at the inn where Kai had been staying, the owner comments that it is sad to think he will no longer see his face around there. Since Kai did not return the previous night, he had already imagined that this might happen. Kai explains that he will no longer be staying there, but assures him that he will still come back to eat there. The owner notices how much he likes the inn's food, and Kai confirms that he thinks everything is absurdly good. Happy with the compliment, the owner says that it means a lot to him, and that he will always be waiting for Kai to stop by. Kai thanks him for his consideration, and the inn owner asks where he intends to stay now. He comments that, depending on the place, he has some influence with a few inns, but Kai explains that he received a house and plans to live there for a while. The owner immediately finds that strange and asks if he really received a house. Kai confirms it, saying that he tried to refuse several times, but the Duke ended up giving him the mansion. The inn owner is shocked to learn that Kai received a house from the Duke. Kai explains that they had apparently been looking for him in several places because they wanted to thank him. The owner understands the situation, but warns him that receiving a villa from a duke is a huge thing. Kai interprets that literally and comments that it really is quite large, but the owner corrects him, saying that this is not what he meant. Then he explains that the number of villas a family owns functions almost like a symbol of that noble house's power. The inn owner continues explaining that a villa is not just a house because it also includes the land it sits on. Because of that, even though handing over one of those properties reduces that symbol of power, the Duke decided that it would be more advantageous to create a direct connection with Kai. Hearing such a detailed analysis, Kai is simply surprised. The owner asks who the protagonist really is, but Kai says that he is just a normal guy. The inn owner does not believe that at all. Before leaving, Kai remembers something and hands him a pouch, thanking him for everything. The inn owner asks what it is and from the sound realizes that there seems to be money inside. Kai explains that it is money and says that the inn owner hit him, gave him advice, and truly helped him a great deal. The man feels uncomfortable and admits that he does not really want to accept money from Kai because it scares him. Kai assures him that there is nothing scary about it, but the owner retorts that the scariest people are exactly the ones who say that. Kai then asks if he would accept it if the money came from someone scary, but the man says that does not make it any better. Kai explains that he is naturally stingy, but this time he is also paying because he feels bad for involving the inn owner in something so absurd. Hearing that, the man finds it strange and asks what absurd thing he means. Kai clarifies that he is talking about the fact that the inn owner hid him from a duke. The man admits that he was sweating cold the entire time, and Kai says he can imagine. Even so, the owner explains that he always tries to treat his guests in the best way possible. Kai then says that he was truly glad to have stayed at that inn. The owner comments, half-jokingly, that this was very nice of him, and Kai agrees. But the man becomes embarrassed and says that it was a joke, so Kai should have denied it because now it has become awkward. The inn owner asks Kai to come back again, and Kai assures him that he definitely will. After he leaves, the man picks up the pouch Kai left on the counter, and as soon as he sees its contents, he is shocked by the amount of money. Unable to believe the sum he received, he can only think that Kai must be messing with him. The inn owner is shaken when he sees the amount Kai left and wonders how he could hand over so much money so easily. To him, that is not something an ordinary person would do, especially after Kai said he was stingy. Meanwhile, in one of the three great powers, the Holy Church, Nina tries to touch the face of a white-haired girl, but she moves her hand away and tells her not to touch her. Seeing her like that, Nina comments that this is her true appearance. She had been blind, but had completely regained her sight thanks to the universal elixir. Enchanted by finally being able to see, Nina observes her sister's face up close, leaving Marie irritated. Marie Qualier and Sage, Nina's older sister, asks who exactly Nina thinks she is and complains that they have already repeated this several times. Nina calmly replies that this must be the 7th time, making Marie suspect that she is doing it on purpose. Nina denies it, but soon scolds her sister, saying that her way of speaking is rough and that she also should not cross her legs, since it does not match her beautiful appearance. Marie says that this level of informality is still fine, since it would only be a problem if someone outside the family saw it. Even so, she says that she knows how to behave properly when necessary and tries to demonstrate it right then. Nina becomes embarrassed and asks her sister not to look at her that way. Marie then comments that, ever since Nina regained her sight, she has become even more proper and well-behaved. Nina replies that she is only saying what anyone should say, but Marie advises her, saying that there is nothing wrong with letting her guard down every now and then. Nina teases Marie, saying that in her case, letting her guard down every now and then means doing it every day. Marie denies it, but Nina insists that this is exactly how it is, while the two continue arguing lightly. As she watches her sister, Marie reflects that ever since Nina started seeing again, she has become more radiant than anyone and has truly begun enjoying each day, something they had never seen before. Then Marie comments that the man in black really does impressive things, since he saved Nina all by himself and even used the universal elixir on her without charging anything. Nina emphasizes that Kai did not use just one universal elixir but 3 at once. This leaves the two even more impressed, and Nina admits, somewhat embarrassed, that both his face and his heart were wonderful, saying that he would be exactly the kind of man Marie would like. Marie then asks if that means he is also Nina's type, but Nina replies that she has only just regained her sight and does not have preferences like that yet. Marie becomes teasing and says they will see about that, but soon warns her that at Nina's age, she should not immediately aim for someone like the man in black. Marie explains that if Kai can use an elixir like that for free, then he definitely belongs to Vertar. Because of that, Nina would have hundreds of rivals if she became interested in him. However, she adds that precisely because her sister is young, she might still have a chance. Nina teases her sister for being so excited, but soon a servant appears and calls the two of them to assume their duties. Marie then resumes her serious posture and says that they can leave it to them. Marie calls Nina to follow her to their duties, and Nina responds hesitantly, still shy in front of her sister. And so, the Unsaj sisters, devoted to service in the Holy Church, walk together while eagerly awaiting the day when they can meet the man in black again. 3 days later, Marie appears exhausted and complains about being tired. Lifia arrives in the rear garden and teases her, saying that she is skipping work again. Marie recognizes Lifia's voice immediately and defends herself, saying that she is not slacking off, just taking a break. Then she comments that it has been a long time since they last saw each other and finds the visit strange, since Lifia was not scheduled for that day. Lifia then reminds Marie that she knows very well she should not enter the rear garden without following the proper procedures. Marie apologizes and then tells her to sit down for now. The two sit in the garden, and Marie asks why Karen is not with Lifia. Lifia explains that Karen stayed outside talking with Nina while she takes care of cleaning the grounds. Hearing that, Marie begins to understand the situation and deduces that if the two of them showed up there that day, then it must have something to do with the ducal house, asking if they managed to thank him properly. Lifia explains that she has just delivered a letter from her parents to Marie and Nina's parents, and that now the two of them are the next ones to visit him. Nina becomes excited at the idea of finally meeting Kai, and Marie comments that it will finally happen, since her sister has spent every day saying that she wanted to see him. Lifia says that Karen is not very different because it seems she has finally found someone else to cling to besides her. Marie remembers that Karen used to always stick close to Lifia, but Lifia comments, laughing, that now Karen practically lives on the man in black's lap. Even after being scolded and getting sore because of the armor, she stayed there the whole time. Marie realizes that the man in black truly has something that attracts people. Lifia admits that it is so much that she cannot even put it into words, saying that he is the most wonderful person she has ever met. Marie is surprised by such a strong statement, but Lifia assures her that she will understand as soon as she meets him. Seeing Lifia speak that way, Marie finds it strange, because that is rare, and asks if the ducal house gave Kai some enormous reward during the meeting. Lifia dodges the question and says that this is debatable. Curious, Marie insists that she tell her, just for reference, since House Unsaj has not yet decided exactly how it will thank the protagonist. They want to know what the ducal house did, so they do not offer something rude or inappropriate. Lifia warns that Marie cannot tell anyone else about it. If the information leaks, she threatens to reveal Marie's true personality. Marie agrees, and Lifia, speaking quietly, reveals that the ducal house's reward was made up of 3 things: a villa, a sum of money, and the family seal. Marie is shocked and asks if that was all, even after the man in black saved Karen's life and even used the universal elixir on her. Marie thinks that reward is not enough, and Lifia admits that she thinks the same way, but says there was not much they could do. Marie disagrees, saying that there was definitely something they could have done. Then Lifia explains that the man in black not only refrained from asking for any reward, but also refused to accept the ones the family offered. Marie is incredulous and says that this already sounds like an exaggerated joke because someone like that does not exist. But Lifia replies that she has been saying it from the beginning. Kai is the most wonderful person she has ever met. Marie notices that Lifia has become embarrassed and says that if it is embarrassing, she does not need to say it out loud. Lifia comments that her father said something similar, admitting that he could not compare to the man in black. Marie is surprised to learn that even Lifia's father said that. Lifia explains that lately he has been racking his brain trying to prepare strategies for the next meeting with Kai. Marie understands that this means that if he does not prepare that much, he will not even be able to keep up with a conversation with the protagonist. Lifia also says that whenever the protagonist is mentioned, her father completely stops smiling, so she believes that something about Kai truly shook him. Impressed, Marie says that if he managed to make Lifia's father feel that way, then Kai is a true monster. Marie comments that the two of them had their younger sisters saved by someone unbelievable. Lifia agrees, and says that it is also possible to think that only someone like the man in black could have saved Karen and Nina, since he makes even nobles feel inferior before him. Then Marie asks if, to Lifia, Kai really seems to be part of Vertar, since she must have her own suspicions. Leafia replies seriously that her father ordered her never to do anything that would turn the protagonist into an enemy of the family. Marie understands the message. Even if Leafia has some idea, she cannot say it out loud. And if he really is from Vertar, that makes everything even more complicated. Leafia then deduces that Marie is talking about what kind of reward would be appropriate for someone like him. Marie understands that Kai is in a position with more power than them. She does not know exactly how Vertar works, but she imagines that the protagonist can probably obtain almost anything he wants. Even so, Leafia comments that during their conversation, she felt that he was happier with the money than with the family seal. Marie is confused, since money is something anyone can earn by working, while the seal of a ducal house cannot be obtained that way. After all, as long as the family exists, that seal functions as a permanent guarantee of support, something anyone would envy. Still, Marie considers that if Kai really is from Vertar, he already has the Emperor's backing, so perhaps it is not so strange that he would prefer money over another kind of protection, such as the family seal. Leafia believes that Kai was happy with the money because it would allow him to help more people in need. Marie is confused by that conclusion, so Leafia explains that for someone with financial difficulties, receiving a villa would already be unbelievable, but a person like that would never be able to buy weapons and armor as impressive as the man in blacks. Understanding her reasoning, Marie concludes that House Ansage should probably also offer a larger sum of money. Leafia then teases her friend, saying that she is almost certain Kai is Marie's type. Marie does not understand where that came from, especially because Nina said the same thing. Leafia simply smiles and comments that Nina really is very perceptive. Marie retorts that Leafia is in no position to tease her, since she herself is making it very clear how much she likes Kai. Then, Marie threatens to tell the man in black that Leafia is completely in love with him, making Leafia panic and try to stop her friend. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Nina excitedly says that she is finally going to meet the protagonist and can hardly wait. Karen recalls that at first the two of them became desperate when they could not find Kai anywhere. Nina agrees, saying that it was strange, since he should have been easy to recognize with that eye-catching equipment, but even so, they still could not find him. Nina admits that she was worried, thinking that Kai might have been reprimanded for using the universal elixir on her. Noticing her guilt, Karen explains that the protagonist would probably scold her for thinking that way. She remembers that Kai said he would be happier if, instead of worrying about him, Nina used her new freedom to do everything she could not do before and enjoy life. Nina is relieved to hear that and thanks Karen, saying that it was very good to know that. Karen also adds that Kai said that, even if he had been scolded, he would not regret any of his choices, and that what seemed to bother him most was the idea of someone feeling guilty because of it. Nina starts thinking that perhaps Kai acted against his superior's orders. Karen considers another possibility. Perhaps he knew that even if he did that, the matter would not become such a big problem. To her, Kai probably has many achievements, so it would make no sense for that organization to want to lose him. Nina reflects that this suits him very well, and Karen agrees, saying that the protagonist seems like the type of person who never gives in when he believes he is right. Then, Nina asks if Karen knows how long Kai will stay in that city. Karen replies that he still has things to take care of there, so he should remain in the region for a while longer. Karen comments that Kai seems to be truly busy. When they went to thank him, Leafia even invited the protagonist to dinner at their house, but he refused, saying that he still had things he needed to do. Nina imagines that perhaps he is helping people somewhere, while Karen thinks that he might also be patrolling the city, since at night that black armor would not attract as much attention. Growing more and more impressed, Nina says that he is incredible. Seeing her interest, Karen decides to share some good information. Apparently, Kai usually has lunch at an inn called LD and likes simple everyday food. Nina repeats the lunchtime and the name LD Inn in her mind, clearly considering going there. Karen notices immediately and asks, startled, if she is thinking of showing up at the place. Nina desperately denies it, saying that of course she would not do that before properly thanking Kai. Even so, she runs off right after that, leaving Karen behind. Seeing this, Karen becomes suspicious and wonders if Nina really does intend to abandon her there. Kai walks through the city and ends up reaching the area around LD Inn. Meanwhile, inside the place, Nina tries to learn more about his routine and asks the inn owner around what time that night usually appears there. The owner is clearly nervous and starts stammering, not knowing whether he should answer. Then, one of Nina's guards pressures the situation more seriously, apologizing but saying that they need the merchant to share that information. The inn owner ends up giving in to the pressure and reveals that Kai normally appears around that time. Outside, the protagonist realizes that the merchant is being pressured and feels uncomfortable, thinking that he had only gone there to eat. Meanwhile, Nina continues trying to obtain information and asks where he usually sits. The inn owner becomes even more nervous, hesitating because he does not know whether he should answer. Nina's guard insists that the inn owner share the information. Pressured by the situation, he finally gives in and points to the place where Kai usually sits, saying that it is right there. Nina continues investigating and asks what Kai usually orders. The inn owner nervously explains that he does not have a fixed dish and usually chooses whatever he feels like eating at the moment. Nina then asks what he ordered most recently, and the owner points out on the menu the dish Kai chose the day before. Determined, Nina orders the same thing. The owner answers in a panic that he will prepare the order, while Kai watches everything from afar in silence, thinking that he did not even know the merchant could shout that loudly. Kai observes the situation from a distance and thinks that one of the visitors even seems kind, but that it might be better to keep his distance that day. Even so, he feels that pretending he did not see the inn owner being pressured would be wrong, especially after all the help he received from him. So Kai decides to go in and see how things unfold, imagining that perhaps the situation will calm down once another customer appears. As he approaches, he confirms that the merchant really is under pressure while the inn owner tries to buy time and asks them to wait just a moment longer. Kai tries to convince himself that he can act as nearby support and stand firm, but admits that even he had to gather his courage to enter the inn. As soon as he appears, Nina, the guard, and the inn owner notice his presence. Even after seeing the whole situation, Kai decides to pretend he saw nothing, thinking that this way he will not be dragged into that mess. Kai tries to enter the inn discreetly, but as soon as he approaches, the conversation suddenly stops. Not understanding their reaction, he becomes nervous and wonders why everyone went silent at that exact moment. Meanwhile, Nina maintains her composure upon his arrival and asks her guard to remain in position. Nina starts approaching Kai, making the protagonist even more nervous. Not knowing why she is coming toward him, Kai tries to ask the inn owner for help, remembering that he entered precisely to help the merchant. The owner understands the situation and discreetly thanks him, saying that he will repay him with a very good meal. Then, Kai tries to regain control of the situation and asks if he can take the order. Standing before Kai, Nina becomes completely nervous, blushing and barely able to answer. Seeing Nina beside him, Kai reacts in confusion, not understanding what she wants from him. Nina, on the other hand, becomes even more nervous in front of the protagonist. Blushing and full of expectation, she asks if Kai remembers her. Kai is completely surprised when he realizes that the girl before him is Nina. Even so, he quickly calms down and says that he remembers her, happy to see that she is doing well. Nina, moved, replies that she is also very happy to see that Kai is well. Then the protagonist addresses Nina's guard and says that he understands she has an image and a position to maintain, but explains that he was the one who asked the merchant to keep everything secret. Because of that, Kai asks her to go easy on the inn owner regarding what happened earlier. Nina's guard realizes that she went too far and apologizes to the merchant, admitting that her attitude was inappropriate. The inn owner immediately tries to calm the situation, saying that there is no problem, and that, if anything, he is the one who is grateful for their understanding. Kai then turns his attention back to Nina and comments that she looks very different from before, even because of her clothes, so he did not recognize her at first. Nina blushes at the comment and asks if that look suits her. Kai says that this look will suit Nina even more when she is older. Nina beams with joy and thanks him very much for the compliment. Then Kai comments that he really had no idea she was connected to the Holy Church. Nina becomes happy and a little embarrassed by his reaction, while her guard watches the scene in silence, clearly surprised by how calmly the two are talking. Kai remembers to ask how Nina's eyesight has been since then. Nina happily replies that it is perfect thanks to him, becoming so excited that she ends up getting too close. Kai is a little startled by her intensity, while Nina remains happy to be able to speak directly with the person who saved her. The protagonist tests Nina to see how her vision is doing. She starts by correctly identifying the gestures he makes with his hand. Seeing that she can recognize everything without difficulty, Kai feels relieved and concludes that she really is fine. Nina then says, emotionally, that now she can say for certain that she is the happiest person in the world, enjoying her days, since she spent years unable to see the faces of her own family members. Kai feels awkward hearing Nina speak so intensely about her happiness and says that she does not need to carry it with such weight. Nina apologizes, but Kai takes the opportunity to advise her. From now on, she should hold her head high and move forward, enjoying everything she can. Otherwise, it would be like showing that the medicine used on her had been wasted. Motivated, Nina promises to do her best. At that moment, the inn owner returns with the food and thanks them for waiting. Nina thanks him for the meal and is surprised by the amount of food on the plate. Kai notices the size of the portion and asks if she ordered the large size. Nina calmly confirms it while her guard also thanks him for the meal. She explains that the large size is practically an adult portion, but she wanted to try eating the same thing as Kai. Nina then reveals that this is exactly why she came there that day. Kai observes the situation and understands that Nina really is trying to act like him, asking if people really become like that when they admire someone. Upon hearing the confirmation, he accepts the explanation and says that if she cannot finish everything, he and the guard can help with the rest, so she does not need to worry. At the same time, Kai thinks that even he gets full from that amount of food. Nina thanks him for his consideration, and Kai also tells her that she does not need to wait for his order to arrive before she starts eating. Kai remembers that Nina has limited time to be outside and says that it would be a waste to let the food get cold after it is already ready. With that, Nina and her guard begin eating. As soon as they taste the dish, Nina comments that it is very good, and the guard agrees immediately. Kai is satisfied to see their reaction and reinforces that the food there is great. The inn owner finds Kai's satisfaction strange and asks why he is so proud of the food. Right after that, when he serves the protagonist's drink with too much force, Kai complains and asks why only his was placed down so aggressively. The merchant asks him to let it slide just this once, saying that Kai had terrified him. Kai tries to defend himself, reminding him that he even explained to the bodyguard that it was his fault. Seeing this exchange between the two, Nina smiles and comments that Kai and the merchant seem very close. Kai tries to confirm that he and the inn owner get along well, but the merchant admits that Kai never tells him anything about his connections or who he really is. He even says that if he had known from the beginning, he probably would have kept his distance. Nina comments that it really must be difficult to deal with someone so mysterious. The owner agrees far too casually, but realizes his mistake right away and tries to correct his tone, saying that yes, he agrees with her. Noticing this, Kai thinks that the merchant ended up speaking to Nina in an informal way. Kai tries to ease the situation and asks Nina's guard to let the merchant's casual tone pass just this once. The guard replies that as long as Nina is not bothered by it, she can ignore it as many times as necessary. Nina smiles and says that she does not mind, and even comments that she would also like the merchant to speak to her more casually, the way Kai does. The inn owner panics and begs to be spared from that. Seeing the merchant so stiff and nervous, Kai finds his reaction funny, but the owner retorts that this is how normal people act, and that the strange one there is Kai himself. While the two are arguing, Nina becomes a little hesitant and apologizes for asking something so suddenly, but says that there is something she would like to ask Kai. Since her time outside the church is limited, she asks if the two of them could set a day and time for her to visit him and properly thank him. Kai is surprised by Nina's request, and the inn owner senses the strange atmosphere, saying that it might be better for him to step away from the table at that moment. Nervous, Kai tries to understand the situation and asks if she wants him to go to the great cathedral or something like that. Nina quickly denies it, explaining that this is not what she means, and that naturally she and the others will go to his residence to thank him. Kai asks if Nina already knows where his residence is, and she apologizes in case that bothers him. The protagonist is intrigued, wondering how she got that information when he had only just received that villa. Even though he is surprised, Kai says that it is fine and that he was just impressed. Then he explains that if they are going to visit him, it needs to be on a day off, because he still has things to take care of during the week. Nina understands since she knows how busy he is and suggests the following Sunday around noon. Kai accepts the suggestion of Sunday at noon, but first asks who exactly intends to visit him. Nina replies that it will be her father, her mother, her older sister, and herself, as well as probably a few guards. Hearing that her entire family will personally go to his residence, Kai is shocked and begins to understand that Nina's family may be far more powerful than he had imagined. Kai asks if he can choose who will actually come to his residence. Nina does not understand, and he explains that he would prefer her parents not to come. She is surprised by his answer, but Kai clarifies that he does not want the visit to become too formal or attract too much attention. The inn owner, overhearing that, cannot resist commenting that this sounds strange coming from someone wearing completely black armor. Kai explains that honestly, he would prefer Nina's parents to prioritize their work since it would be problematic if something happened while they were away. While the guard thanks him for the food, Nina still tries to insist, but Kai says that even without her parents, they can still thank him normally and that he is not asking Nina to come alone. In truth, Kai thinks that high-ranking people like her parents make him uncomfortable, and he really does not want to meet them. Then he asks if the problem is that her family does not trust Nina to visit his house with only attendants, but Nina immediately denies it, saying that it is nothing like that. Kai decides to end the matter and leaves the task of informing Nina's superiors about the visit to the bodyguard. The guard replies that this had been her intention from the beginning, and Kai thanks her, saying that it will be a great help. Relieved, he thinks that this time, everything is going well. However, Nina and the guard fall silent, making their reaction a little difficult to interpret. After finishing the meal, Nina politely says goodbye to Kai, saying that she and her guard will take their leave for now and that they hope to see him again soon. Kai responds normally and says goodbye to them. With that, the two of them leave the inn while the protagonist simply watches them go. After Nina and her guard leave, Kai lets out a long sigh, completely exhausted. The inn owner, bringing his plate, asks if Kai is sure he is the one who should be tired in that situation. The protagonist complains that dealing with that group would leave anyone exhausted. The merchant, even more worn out, makes it clear that he was the one who suffered the most there. Kai does not argue and simply concludes that in that case, both of them can say they are tired. The inn owner admits that he had already imagined Kai was not someone ordinary, but he never thought he would be capable of facing the Holy Church as an equal. Hearing this, Kai thinks that it would be much easier if that idea were true. Seeing the protagonist distracted, the inn owner asks why he is staring into nothing and comments that he can stop acting now. Kai then brings his hand to his helmet and says that he just realized something. Even after learning everything, the inn owner has not changed at all in the way he treats him. The inn owner replies that acting normally is also better for Kai, and the protagonist admits that this helps a lot. The inn owner becomes worried and asks Kai not to sue him later for something like disrespect. Kai assures him that he would not do that and says that, to begin with, he is not in any position to go around talking about disrespect. Then he comments that the bodyguard seemed truly frightening and thinks that she must definitely be among the best. The inn owner confirms this and explains that all the Holy Church's guards are elite. Kai understands that this makes sense since there would be no way to do that kind of work otherwise. After that, he says that he only heard parts of the conversation, but that now the inn owner can tell them everything he knows about him. The inn owner gets irritated and says Kai should have told him that earlier, while the protagonist simply apologizes. The merchant explains that Kai himself heard how easy they went on him, and Kai finds that way of saying it strange. Then the inn owner clarifies that the guards did not try to impose their authority or threaten him. They only asked for the information politely. Even so, while he was stalling because of his own confusion, Nina was outside with limited time to eat. Because of that, he understands that, for a guard who needs to make sure Nina has her meal on time, that firmer attitude was the right thing to do. That is also how they show loyalty. Kai understands the situation and comments that being a bodyguard also seems tough, like someone who ends up caught in the crossfire. The inn owner replies that this happens to anyone who serves powerful people and says that he imagined Kai would understand that better than most. He explains that he heard Kai try to defend that person's side by arguing that she had a public image and position to worry about. But Kai responds lightly that he actually does not understand any of that and only said something that seemed to make sense. The inn owner concludes that if Kai does not understand that kind of concern, then it can only mean that he is in a position where he does not need to deal with such things. Right after that, he is startled by his own conclusion and asks if Kai is in an even higher position than a bishop of the Holy Church. Kai tries to explain that it is exactly the opposite, saying that he is so far beneath them that he cannot even understand that world. But the inn owner gets irritated and ends the conversation right there. Kai still tries to ask to talk a little more, but feels that the misunderstandings are only getting worse. As the carriage continues on its way, Nina's guard is satisfied that her young lady managed to see Shikoku. Inside the carriage, Nina comments that she really wanted to eat the same thing as him, so she is very happy. She then asks what impression her guard had of Shikoku. She replies that, without a doubt, he is a powerful man, but Nina clarifies that she wanted to know more about what he is like on the inside. Nina's guard apologizes, saying that she was under constant surveillance, and, because of that, did not have time to think about the impression she had of Shikoku. Nina is startled to hear that she was being watched, and the guard explains that it is common for people to lower their guard while eating, so they were probably testing whether she would relax at some point. Then she says seriously that as Nina's escorts, they already carry the great failure of having allowed her to be kidnapped. Nina's guard continues explaining that besides the kidnapping, they also failed to notice Shikoku's presence, and she considers that unforgivable. She states that the fact that they had been speaking with the merchant was no excuse for lowering their vigilance. Nina tries to consider the possibility that Shikoku simply has a very subtle presence, but the guard rejects that idea and says that it can only be a complete difference in skill, although she thanks her for her concern. To her, it is even possible that Shikoku predicted a potential conflict with the merchant, since the timing and every detail seemed too perfect to be mere coincidence. Faced with that conclusion, Nina falls silent. Nina's guard considers that Shikoku may have already had information that they would go to that inn, or else he possesses an extraordinary ability to read situations. Because of that, she starts thinking about the true meaning behind his words. Nina agrees to report all of that to her father, and the guard realizes that she is also thinking about the gratitude. Then she comments that this detail also caught her attention, because someone in Shikoku's position would never waste the chance to create a connection with Nina's parents. The guard continues saying that this becomes even stranger because Shikoku was in a position to receive a favor in return. Although he said that he does not like attracting attention, Nina understands that it was probably just a pretext. The guard explains that ordinary people normally say they do not like dealing with powerful people, but the natural way Shikoku interacted with Nina does not fit that excuse. Besides that, since there are rumors that he belongs to Vertar, she believes that he is probably already used to that kind of interaction. Nina admits that she does not like thinking about it, but begins to suspect that perhaps some problem is forming in the great cathedral. The guard cannot say for certain, but she believes that, knowing Shikoku, there must be an important reason behind those words. To her, he is not someone who would say something like that for a trivial reason, remembering the moment when he said he would prefer that Nina's parents not come. With that, the guard concludes that they should consult Nina's father as soon as possible and ask permission to tell the coachman to speed up the carriage. Nina says that it is fine, and her guard asks the coachman to go as fast as possible. Later, in a mansion, Marie thinks about Shikoku's request. Despite all the concerns surrounding the situation, she cannot ignore the fact that he personally chose her. As she reflects on this, Marie concludes to herself that if he asked for her directly, then he must have good taste. Nina notices Marie's nervousness and comments that her voice is trembling and so are her legs. Marie tries to compose herself, but she is still clearly shaken, explaining that she did not expect Shikoku to specifically say that he did not want their parents to come thank him. With all those rumors involving Vertar and other strange details, she cannot understand the true reason behind that request. Nina tries to reassure Marie, saying that everything will be all right because Shikoku is a wonderful person. Still nervous, Marie tries to convince herself that he must be someone generous, at least in theory. Then Nina reinforces that idea with a compliment, saying that he is as generous as Marie herself. Marie tries to convince herself that maybe it is only fair for her to go to Shikoku, and Nina cheerfully agrees, saying that she thinks it is fine. Seeing that reaction, Marie panics and wonders if Nina is trying to get her killed. Even so, she concludes that it would be much easier if only she went, but tries to cling to one condition. To make a good impression, it would be ideal to present a more adapted version of herself. Nina smiles and says that she likes the real Marie just the way she truly is. Hearing that, Marie accepts her sister's words and replies that she will take them seriously. Marie shifts the focus of the conversation and acknowledges that Shikoku truly is incredible. She thinks that he was the first to notice suspicious movements from that new religious group and warn the others about the danger. From what Nina told her about how busy he seemed, Marie believes that he must be investigating all kinds of things. Nina is curious about how he obtains so much information, but soon concludes that perhaps it is better for them not to know. Marie thinks that if they try to investigate Kai more deeply, there is a chance he could start seeing them as enemies. In the worst-case scenario, Shikoku might decide that they are no longer worth the trouble and cut all ties. Imagining that possibility, Marie concludes that, from any point of view, the protagonist is a true monster. Because of that, she warns Nina that for all they know, he could even be listening to that conversation at that very moment. Marie tries to laugh off Nina's concern, saying that this is impossible because there are guards at the entrance, but Nina insists that anything could be possible. Right after that, they hear footsteps coming from above, and Marie realizes in shock that someone is walking on the ceiling. Nina calls Marie nervously while the footsteps continue coming from the ceiling. Trying to calm herself, Marie says that it must just be some animal, and remembers a time when something similar happened, trying to convince herself that it can only be that again. Even so, Nina becomes uneasy because those footsteps started at that exact moment. Marie tries to convince herself that, in any case, Kai is kind and would not be watching the two of them just to act if something happened. Nina reinforces that idea, saying that he is very kind. Still trying to dispel the tension, they remember that there are guards at the main gate, so there is no way someone could simply enter the mansion. On the promised day, Kai is at the inn again while the owner comments that if he were in Kai's place, he would not even have time to go out because he would be replaying the entire meeting in his head. Kai understands what he means and thanks him for the meal. On the promised day, the representatives of the house responsible for the Holy Church are finally arriving. Kai has already made sure that Nina's powerful parents will not come and has also mentally reviewed the entire first meeting, prepared for everything to go according to plan. The only thing still worrying Kai is having to speak with Nina's sister for the first time. Even so, he believes he has a perfect plan. If the situation becomes complicated, he intends to throw all the responsibility onto Nina and let her deal with the rest. Kai admits that, honestly, there was another reason he wanted to go to the inn on such an important day. Noticing that he is deep in thought, the inn owner asks if something is on his mind. Kai then explains that a few days earlier, Duke de Gotha, the father of Karen and Lifia, assigned a live-in maid to manage the property in his place. Kai continues explaining that the maid keeps a certain distance, so living on that estate ends up feeling a little lonely. The inn owner shows pity and says that it must be sad, as well as an enormous responsibility. At that moment, something falls heavily, making the atmosphere uncomfortable. Kai thinks that, after being scolded by Nina's bodyguard, perhaps the inn owner is trying to act more carefully. Thinking about it, Kai realizes that the inn is much busier than before, with more customers and even more employees working there. When he comments on this out loud, the inn owner smiles and says that all of it is thanks to him. The inn owner explains that after Kai started eating there, Nina also appeared at the place. Because of that, rumors spread, and now everyone wants to eat the same thing she ate. Kai is surprised to realize just how popular Nina is. The inn owner comments that ever since she regained her sight, she has been appearing more in public, and Kai understands the reason, thinking that even though she is still young, it is already easy to see that she will become very beautiful. Then the merchant remembers something and says that he has something to give Kai. The inn owner talks about the religious group that appeared out of nowhere and seems to be trying to stir up conflict with the holy church to which Nina belongs. To him, that was what Kai was planning to investigate, and the matter seems quite serious. Kai finds the information strange and asks if the owner heard that from a customer. The inn owner confirms that he heard it from customers and explains that they were spreading rumors that archbishops and bishops have been doing bad things. From the sound of it, this group is trying to incite the Holy Church's followers in order to provoke an internal split and weaken the influence of the Unsaj family. Hearing this, Kai thinks that it must be difficult to be in a position of power, since people like that end up being dragged into problems all the time. The inn owner thinks Kai's reaction makes sense, saying that there is no way he does not already know the kind of information the merchant can pick up in that place. Kai asks what would happen if he said he did not know, but the inn owner jokes that he would only answer with that attitude of someone who already understood everything. Not really understanding what that is supposed to mean, Kai leaves the matter aside and thinks that either way, the Holy Church should be able to deal with a problem like that. Kai tries to rationalize that the Holy Church must be discussing countermeasures and that it would not let its prestige be destroyed so easily. But the inn owner says that he would like to believe that, except the situation seems like a huge mess. For something that appeared out of nowhere, that new religious group is gaining strength far too quickly. Kai tries to reassure the inn owner, saying that everything will be fine. To him, in the end, the Holy Church still has enough power and recognition to deal with it. But the inn owner interprets Kai's calmness another way and asks if he has perhaps already started acting behind the scenes. Surprised, Kai does not understand where that conclusion came from and asks what he is talking about. The inn owner stares at Kai in silence, making the protagonist uncomfortable. Not understanding that expression, Kai wonders what that look is supposed to mean, until the merchant makes it clear that he simply does not believe him. Trying to change the subject, Kai says that either way, he managed to learn some useful things from that conversation. Kai decides that he will also ask Nina to see what she knows about the matter. To him, this is the best option, since her family would probably be more willing to consult Nina than to trust him directly. After that, Kai asks if the bill for the day comes to 10,000 regal, including the information fee, but the inn owner tells him not to be ridiculous, because he only told Kai something he supposedly already knew. The inn owner also says that since Kai brought Nina there, the meal will be on the house for now. Kai is surprised and asks if he is serious. The owner confirms it, telling him not to be shy and to come back again. To Kai, this is a great help, and he is clearly excited by the news. As expected, Kai's good deed ends up coming back to him. After helping bring business to the inn and bringing Nina there, the owner makes the meal free and the protagonist leaves satisfied. With his stomach full, Kai realizes in practice that doing good really can bring something good back. At the estate, Kai's housekeeper finds it strange that he is wearing armor to meet Lady Nina and Lady Marie, asking if it is really necessary. Kai answers that it is just a precaution, since one never knows what might happen. The maid questions Kai, saying that even if he needed to fight, would he not be stronger using his own hands than that armor? This is the live-in maid he had mentioned to the inn owner, and lately she has also become someone who makes him a little nervous. Surprised by the comment, Kai asks where she heard that. The maid replies that she heard it from Lord Dagote, but assures him that the information is strictly internal and that there is no reason to worry about it spreading. Kai simply accepts the explanation but feels relieved that he kept the armor on, since that way she cannot see how embarrassed he became underneath the helmet. Kai confirms that the visitors are Nina and Marie, and the maid offers to take care of everything, asking where he would like them to be escorted first. This attitude puts even more pressure on Kai because choosing the location only makes the situation harder for him. The maid suggests either the office or the reception room and assures him that she sees no problem with either option. Kai decides that it would be best to receive the visitors in the office, and the maid accepts immediately, responding calmly and respectfully. Seeing how naturally she can act even in that situation, Kai is impressed and thinks that he truly envies her composure. The maid assumes that the guards will also enter together with Nina and Marie, so she asks what Kai would like to do about that. He thinks for a moment and suggests letting them wait somewhere near the office, since he would rather not hold the meeting under their constant gaze. The maid agrees that this should work, and Kai decides to allow the guards to move freely around the mansion, since they would probably get bored just standing still and waiting. The maid is surprised by Kai's decision and asks if he is sure. Not understanding her reaction, Kai asks if letting the guards walk around the mansion would be a problem. The maid replies that as long as he agrees to it, she sees no problem. Even so, Kai notices that she seems shaken and begins to worry, hoping that it is not a bad sign. Changing the subject, Kai comments that he was thinking of sharing some of the sweets Karen brought when she delivered the family seal, saying that they are very good. The maid, however, is confused by his question, and Kai does not understand her reaction. Awkwardly, she apologizes and asks what exactly he meant by "what do you think?", becoming visibly embarrassed by the situation. The maid, still somewhat hesitant, says that she sees no problem with sharing the sweets. With that decided, Kai takes the opportunity to ask how much a box of them costs, already thinking about buying some. She answers that she does not know the exact price, but believes it is around 50,000 regal. Hearing this, Kai is shocked, unable to believe that simple sweets could cost so much. Kai then asks about the ring with the gemstone that he also received. The maid explains that she does not know the exact price, but estimates that it is worth somewhere between 5 and 10 million regal. Hearing this, Kai simply tries to process the absurd value. Seeing his reaction, the maid interprets it as if the reward were insufficient and asks if he would like her to discreetly convey that to the Duke. Kai immediately denies it, saying that it is nothing like that. In truth, just the idea of casually receiving something so expensive already gives him a headache, and he even asks if he really seems that greedy. The maid assures him that he does not, explaining that Lord Degoti only asked to be informed immediately if anything happened. Kai thinks that the Duke did not need to worry that much, but the maid clarifies that this is how a noble keeps his honor intact. Kai then asks if there is anything the maid wants. She finds the question strange, and he explains that he would feel bad only being on the receiving end, so he wants to give something back to her as well. The maid politely refuses, saying that she is only an employee and that Lord Degoti already rewards her more than fairly, so he does not need to concern himself with that. Even so, Kai insists that she not be so stiff and asks her to simply say what she likes. The maid becomes embarrassed, but eventually admits that she likes sweets. Kai is encouraged by the answer and says that, in that case, next time he will bring several for her. She thanks him, still a little shy, and Kai decides to head to the office, saying that he has things to do before Nina and Marie arrive. Before leaving, he asks the maid to simply follow the plan when they arrive, and she confirms that she understands. After Kai leaves for the office, the maid becomes worried and thinks that perhaps she should inform Lord Degote about his behavior. To her, the casual way Kai spoke of sharing a little of those sweets with people of higher status sounds almost disrespectful, but at the same time, it fits exactly the kind of attitude one would expect from someone connected to Vertar. When Marie and Nina arrive at the mansion accompanied by their guards, Kai's maid formally receives them and thanks them for coming despite their busy schedules. Then she calls them by name and leads the two inside, while the imposing presence of the visitors and their escort makes the weight of that meeting clear. Upon entering the mansion, Nina's vice captain of the guard is surprised to find the maid still serving there. The maid explains that when the villa was granted, she thought she might lose her position, but Kai took her situation into consideration. The vice captain finds that choice strange, and the maid confirms it, saying that, knowing the protagonist, he could easily have put someone more competent in her place. The vice captain suggests that perhaps Kai kept the maid precisely because he judged her capable of continuing in that position. But the maid disagrees, saying that she had never met Shikoku before and had no direct connection to him, so he would have had no basis to evaluate her abilities. The vice captain reminds her that they are talking about him, so anything may be possible. The maid becomes thoughtful for a moment, but soon concludes that they will only go in circles if they keep trying to understand the protagonist's motives, and the vice captain agrees. The maid explains that Shikoku is seen as a reserved man, someone who gives others very little information to work with, and on top of that, everyone has been forbidden from investigating him. Even so, the vice captain comments that it must be difficult to have him as the master of the house. The maid admits that honestly she is certain she has been more tense than anyone else, since even Lord Degode himself bows his head before him. Besides that, she also finds it strange that there are no guards stationed anywhere on the property. The vice captain understands the situation and asks if, as they imagined, Kai simply said there was no need. The maid says that Kai dismissed the guards by saying that they would only make everything feel suffocating. The vice captain understands that as an indirect way of saying that if anyone wants to come after him, they are welcome to try. The maid agrees with that interpretation, since Shikoku certainly has the skill to back up that confidence. Still, she admits that even without guards, being inside his territory may be the safest place possible. Seeing the burden this places on her, the vice captain jokes that she should be careful and not let so much tension ruin her stomach. The vice captain decides to end the small talk for now and confirms once again that the guards are free to spend their time however they wish until the meeting with Kai is over. The maid confirms that this was exactly what he instructed. Then the vice captain asks for her opinion, since she lives with Shikoku every day and might be able to better understand what he meant by that permission. The maid becomes nervous and warns that she cannot take responsibility for her words but agrees to speak if it is only speculation. The vice captain agrees, ready to listen. The maid explains that she does not believe Kai simply allowed the guards to rest or wander around the mansion aimlessly. To her, that is not the complete interpretation, since protecting their masters is their most important duty, and Shikoku would never have ordered the guards to abandon that role. The maid concludes that if they were placed in a specific waiting room, they might not be able to react quickly enough in an emergency, or that could interfere with their work. The maid believes that when Kai told the guards to do as they wished, he was not telling them all to relax, but rather allowing them to act according to their own abilities and judgment. The vice captain understands that if that is the reason, then, from Shikoku's point of view, he truly does not depend on them for anything. But the maid clarifies that perhaps it is not a lack of trust, but rather a way to make sure they do not rely too much on his help. To her, Kai is forcing the guards to face a harsh reality. She concludes that Kai will not always be around to get the guards out of trouble. Because of that, if they want to protect Nina and Marie's happiness, they need to develop that mindset on their own. Meanwhile, Nina enjoys the sweets and finds them delicious, but the maid emphasizes that this is only her guess, although it seems like the most likely explanation. The vice captain thanks her for her opinion and asks her to also convey her gratitude to Shikoku. Kai is completely confused by the two women's reaction. To him, he only said something normal, like letting the guards act freely instead of being stuck waiting, and he does not understand why that is being interpreted as a profound order. The protagonist tries to convince himself that he did not say anything rude, and that, in truth, they are the ones reacting strangely. Even so, the atmosphere of the meeting becomes heavy, until Marie apologizes and asks how she can become more like him. She wants to understand how to see beyond situations, predict how her actions may affect herself and the people around her, and better adjust her conduct from then on. Kai becomes even more lost because of Marie's question and repeats, without understanding, that idea of seeing beyond and adjusting her future conduct. Marie simply confirms that this is exactly it, leaving the protagonist panicking inside because he wanted to hear a better explanation instead of receiving a simple yes. Not knowing how to answer something so serious, Kai looks at Nina for help and desperately wonders what he should do in that situation. Kai tries to clarify that there has been a misunderstanding and says that he is not seeing beyond anything. He explains that he only meant exactly what he said. He wanted Marie to relax because that would make the conversation easier, especially since they had not even reached the main topic yet. Nina then warns her sister that if she keeps acting like that, her dignity may end up being damaged. Seeing the atmosphere becoming stranger and stranger, Kai realizes that at this rate, the entire mood of the meeting will collapse. Kai tries to follow the logic of the conversation and ends up saying that if Marie thinks that is bad for her dignity, then that kind of thing can happen. But that answer only worsens the misunderstanding. Marie is shaken and believes that Kai has discovered something she had been hiding from everyone until now. Nina, on the other hand, enjoys her sister's reaction and comments that she seems to have won the little bet between them. Meanwhile, Kai is completely exhausted, unable to understand how the conversation reached that point. Kai is surprised when Marie completely changes her demeanor from one moment to the next. To him, the nervous girl from before disappears, and now she seems like a completely different person. More confident, Marie says that she will believe in Shikoku and try to relax, but asks him not to call it bad manners or anything like that. Seeing this change, Kai realizes that perhaps this is the real Marie deep down. Marie tries to begin the main topic and start thanking him, but Kai interrupts her before she can go any further. He says that before that, there is something else he wants to talk about, trying to bring up the issue of the new religious group as much as possible. Nina finds the change of subject strange, and Kai explains that he is referring to the group that recently appeared and seems to be creating conflict with the Holy Church, asking if everything is all right regarding that. Nina asks if Kai really does not mind talking about that subject first, and he answers that he does not mind at all. In truth, he is even happier to talk about it since the thanks can be left for any time, but he would rather hear about the new religious group first. Hearing this, Nina sincerely thanks him, leaving Kai confused because he does not understand why she is thanking him. Meanwhile, Marie interprets his attitude in another way and wonders just how far Shikoku can truly see into the situation. While the protagonist simply finds that reaction strange, Nina decides to explain the situation and Kai says that he is counting on her. She then says that regarding the new religious group, they have already prepared sufficient measures to deal with everything they can reasonably predict. Marie reinforces that they are not treating the matter naively, but Nina admits that their ability to foresee things is still limited. Because of that, they decided to act against that group before it grows even stronger. Marie explains that they do not care if people believe in something else, but this time, the problem is that this group is deliberately trying to tarnish the name of the Holy Church. Kai understands that this reaction from the group was to be expected, but inside, he is confused to realize that a casual conversation has turned into a full strategic meeting. He summarizes that, then, they are planning to lure the enemy in and hit them with a counterattack. Marie confirms this and explains that they leaked the information that the entire Ansaj family would be away from the great cathedral that day. Since the new religious group has been becoming more active recently, there is a good chance they will try to move now. In addition, in the entire long history of the Holy Church, there has never been a time when all the Ansage were absent at the same time. Kai understands the strategy and concludes that if the misinformation has already spread, then that day really is the enemy's best chance to attack. He confirms whether Nina's parents are still at the cathedral surrounded by extra guards and with security reinforced, and Marie answers yes. With that, Kai believes they will probably be fine. Nina then asks if Shikoku also thinks everything will be resolved safely. Kai replies that with all that preparation, he believes everything should be fine. Even if the enemy does not act that day, keeping their guard up will allow them to get through the situation safely. Besides that, he comments that people who do bad things always end up paying for it sooner or later. Finally, Kai asks Nina and Marie to convey his thanks to their parents for their effort and all their hard work. Hearing this, the two are surprised by the simple and direct way he acknowledges their work. With a smile on his face, he simply asks them to do that for him, since it is nothing major. Meanwhile, at the great cathedral, some members of the church begin questioning whether they should really stay still and do nothing. They fear that, at this rate, the new religious group will become even more encouraged, and that the complete absence of the leaders will seriously damage the church's reputation. The religious leader acknowledges that concern and admits that he also feels guilty for not being able to fulfill his usual duties, but makes it clear that they have decided to trust Shikoku's words and will not go back on that decision. The bearded knight remains skeptical about the decision to follow Shikoku's warning. To him, it is pathetic to act as if someone could really see that far into the future, because if that were possible, no one would ever have to struggle. He thinks that a person like that simply does not exist, and that, to begin with, Shikoku is nothing more than an outsider who only recently arrived there. Unable to believe any of it, he starts complaining internally, thinking that Kai has no way of obtaining such specific information and probably just said something that sounded plausible. As far as he is concerned, nothing is going to happen, so staying there is nothing but a waste of time. An hour later, he is still irritated and thinks this only proves how exaggerated the whole thing was, insisting that it is already time for everyone to return to their duties. Half an hour later, his impatience grows even worse, and he concludes that they have gone far beyond what is reasonable, and there is no reason to keep waiting like this. By the time 2 hours have passed, he is completely fed up and finds the entire situation absurd, but at that very moment, a soldier suddenly appears shouting that he has an urgent report. The information is that the new religious organization is approaching the cathedral carrying signs, and there is a possibility that they intend to stage a protest at the entrance, or even seize the place by force. Hearing this, the bespectacled bishop immediately takes action and orders security units 1 and 2 to leave through the rear and move toward the right side of the entrance, while units 3 and 4 are to head toward the left. He makes it clear that the ones doing something disgraceful are the opposition, so they must not allow even a single person to escape. He then shouts for everyone available inside the cathedral to be called and gathered at the entrance. Soon afterward, the bishop himself steps forward and declares that he will provide a proper explanation for every accusation made by the opposition, emphasizing that everyone there will serve as witnesses. Everyone is stunned, and the bearded knight can only react in shock as he realizes that the situation is actually unfolding exactly as Shikoku predicted. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Kai looks over the entire reward prepared by Nina and Marie and admits that it is difficult for him to say this, but he does not need to receive so much. Nina immediately asks him not to refuse, while Marie explains that if he does not accept it, it will put the two of them in a difficult position as well. From Kai's perspective, however, he is the one being backed into a corner, and even with Marie practically begging him to accept it, the protagonist continues to hesitate. Watching his reaction, Marie realizes that Kai truly has no intention of keeping all of it. Remembering what Lifia had told her about him, she starts to find that almost frightening. After all, Kai risked his own life to save Nina, yet he can still act as though a reward of that magnitude means nothing to him. Unable to accept everything, Kai decides to take only 2 portions of the reward and says that this is already more than enough because receiving too much honestly scares him. Nina and Marie are left completely speechless by his choice. Taking advantage of the moment, Kai changes the subject slightly and asks Nina whether, even after giving him all of that, her parents still intend to come to the mansion personally to thank him. Nina cheerfully confirms that it has already been decided, but her answer immediately makes the protagonist uneasy. Noticing the change in his expression, Marie asks whether there is some problem with their parents visiting. Kai then decides to make 2 things very clear. First, what he has already received is more than enough as thanks. Second, he has no intention of accepting any additional favors beyond that. Because of this, there is absolutely no need for either of their parents to come all the way there. Nina still tries to argue, but Kai explains that he understands their concern with appearances, status, and the need to handle things properly. Even so, he does not want anything else and thinks their parents should be focused on other priorities. Marie finds the wording strange and asks what those other priorities might be. Kai replies that people in their position surely cannot afford to waste time and must have plenty of more important matters to deal with, although inwardly he admits that he has no idea what those things actually are. Nina and Marie fall into thought, trying to understand what exactly he means. The protagonist continues by saying that if visiting his mansion would only waste their time, he would rather they use those hours on something that genuinely helps the city. He believes their parents have the power to do that and explains that this is also why he refuses to accept all that money. To Kai, it would be far better for that fortune to be put to use out there than simply spent on him. And the more useful the money becomes, the more it will count as a form of gratitude. Besides, if the Holy Church grows stronger, the seal he received will become even more valuable, since the protection it provides will grow stronger as well. Finally, understanding his reasoning, Marie accepts his decision and promises that everything Kai is returning will be put to the best possible use. Nina is surprised by how easily her sister agrees, but Marie points out that there is not much to discuss since this is what Shikoku wants. Kai feels relieved when he hears that. To Marie, his intention seems to be something along the lines of everyone working together to make things better, and this reminds her of Lifia's words. Earlier, Lifia had already remarked that Kai seemed happier about the possibility of putting the money to good use than about receiving the seal itself, believing that he liked the idea of indirectly helping more people in need. She had even lamented that Kai would not simply lend all that power directly to the Holy Church and, to top it off, teased Marie by saying that he seemed exactly like the kind of man she would like. Remembering this, Marie gets annoyed with herself and blames Lifia for making her think about such strange things at a moment like this. Before she can drift any further into her thoughts, Kai remembers something else he wanted to give them. He calls Nina over and places a key in her hands. The girl looks at the object in confusion until Kai explains that it is a key to that very mansion. Nina reacts with surprise, and the protagonist explains that, as she can see, he cannot properly make use of such a large house by himself. Because of that, if anything ever happens, Nina can come and go whenever she wants, whether accompanied by someone or even by herself. The girl becomes even more surprised and asks if he is really sure that is okay. Kai explains that he had already given the same key to Karen and Lifia, the Duke's daughters, so Nina does not need to think too much about it. She can use the mansion as a meeting place whenever she wants, or simply come by to spend some time there. Nina beams with joy and thanks him, hugging the protagonist, while Marie silently watches everything, thinking that even if Kai has more than enough space in that enormous house, it still is not normal to go around handing out spare keys to one's own residence like that. And if Lifia also received a spare key, Marie is almost certain that she deliberately kept that detail from everyone. Shortly afterward, Kai remembers something else and calls Marie directly. The girl responds somewhat nervously, and the protagonist tells her that she really does not need to keep holding herself back whenever she is in that house. He asks her to relax and act naturally, then adds without thinking much about it that in fact, he prefers Marie the way she is right now. The remark catches her completely off guard. Blushing, Marie awkwardly thanks him while wondering internally why he had to say something like that so directly and out of nowhere. Nina, seeing her sister's reaction, happily comments that this is wonderful, but Marie immediately tells her to be quiet. Sometime later, Nina and Marie finally prepare to return home. At the entrance, Kai's maid thanks the two of them for visiting and wishes them a safe trip. As she watches the sisters leave, however, she thinks that under normal circumstances, that mansion would be exactly the kind of place she would rather have nothing to do with. But her current master is someone capable of leaving even Digote completely unsure of how to act, so She knows very well that she cannot afford to make even the smallest mistake while working there. After the visitors leave, the maid returns and knocks on Kai's door. The protagonist allows her to enter, and the woman apologizes for the interruption before saying that she hopes the meeting went well, and that she only came to formally inform him that Lady Nina and Lady Marie had already departed. Kai thanks her for going out of her way to tell him, but the maid notices that he seems somewhat worn out after the conversation. Looking at his armor, she asks whether he really stayed dressed like that throughout the entire meeting, and Kai calmly confirms that he did, saying that he needed it. The maid simply replies that she understands, but inwardly she becomes even more confused, thinking that if she were a little smarter, perhaps she could understand what exactly Shikoku meant when he said he needed it. For Kai, of course, the armor mainly served to hide his nervousness and help him get through the conversation without revealing everything on his face. Changing the subject, the protagonist mentions that he also gave 2 keys to the mansion to Nina and Marie, thinking that if they ever come by in the future, he can leave whatever needs to be handled to the maid. She immediately replies that she understands. Kai finds her reaction surprisingly casual and asks if she really was not shocked to hear that he handed out the keys like that. The maid explains that there was not much left to be surprised about after what she saw when the girls were leaving. Nina was practically glowing with happiness as she put the key into the lock and repeatedly opened and closed the door simply because she was so excited to be able to do it. Kai immediately understands and comments with a smile that, despite Nina's usual serious demeanor, moments like that still make it obvious how young she really is. The maid then adds that Marie also left a few words before departing. According to her, Lady Marie said that she thinks very highly of Shikoku and mentioned that she would like to visit him again soon. Kai is genuinely happy to hear that and admits that even if it was only a polite courtesy or a compliment out of kindness, he is already pleased. The maid, however, does not believe it was mere flattery. She explains that she had never seen Marie act that way before. Kai tries to find a simpler explanation and assumes that perhaps the girl was simply relieved after finally completing the task of thanking him. After all, Marie had come there representing the entire Ansage family despite being so young, so he thinks it would be natural for her to have been under considerable pressure and finally relax once she had fulfilled her role. The maid considers that possibility but raises another theory. Perhaps it was Kai's own way of speaking to Marie that affected her so deeply. The protagonist immediately rejects the idea, saying there is absolutely no chance of that being true. When he notices the maid's doubtful expression, Kai asks what that suspicious look is supposed to mean. She replies that she did not mean anything by it, but inwardly thinks it is difficult not to reach that kind of conclusion when he can handle even Digote the way he does. If Kai can carry on a conversation with someone like the Duke without showing any difficulty, then it does not seem unreasonable to imagine that he can do the same with other people. The protagonist merely sighs and says he would love to possess all that composure she seems to think he has. To the maid, however, that casual response itself is proof that Kai has such an ability and simply does not realize it. In her mind, Shikoku knows perfectly well how to adjust the way he treats someone, depending on who is standing in front of him. With the still young Ansage sisters, he used gentle, reassuring words to ease the tension and make them feel comfortable. But with Duke Digote, whose stomach apparently already suffers enough from stress, Kai seemed to simply flip a switch and use sharp, merciless words to pressure him without the slightest restraint. Thinking about that frightening difference, the maid concludes that all she can do is pray that Shikoku never decides to flip that same switch on her. Looking once again at the symbols and rewards that have now become part of the mansion, she realizes that she still needs to grow accustomed much more quickly to the atmosphere of that place and, above all, to her new master's values. The more she tries to understand Kai, the more she realizes that he truly is completely different from the people she was used to dealing with. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, Marie can barely contain herself and excitedly calls out to Nina so she can share the news, repeating that Kai clearly said he prefers her the way she really is. Still thrilled, she says that no man has ever told her anything like that before. Nina tries to calm her down and warns that if she keeps talking so loudly, everyone around them will hear, but Marie does not care and says that is perfectly fine. Nina then looks at her sister and thinks about how quickly she has changed, since before meeting the man in black she had been trembling with nervousness, yet now she seems like a completely different person. Marie immediately fires back by reminding her that Nina herself had been happily opening and closing the mansion door over and over with the key. The two then glare at each other in irritation, and Marie eventually holds out her hand and tells Nina to give her the key so she can keep it herself, but Nina refuses on the spot. Marie says this is no time to be stubborn, but Nina insists that the key was something Kai personally entrusted to her. Marie then warns that if Nina loses it, all the responsibility will fall on her because Although her sister usually seems reliable, she can also be rather absent-minded at times. Nina remains hesitant and keeps trying to find reasons not to hand it over, but in the end, she gives in and passes Marie the key, admitting that losing it would definitely not be good. Marie then changes the subject and admits that, now that she thinks about it, Kai is actually a rather frightening man. She says he immediately saw through the polite and controlled persona she had been putting on, something she honestly thought no one would ever notice. To Marie, his powers of observation are simply absurd. Nina reminds her that their father had already said that, if it was Kai, it would not be surprising for him to see right through her. Marie replies that she knows, but even so, part of her had still been convinced that perhaps it was not really true. She even admits that if their father had not left instructions telling her to cooperate if Kai pressured her, she probably would have ended up leaving a terrible impression of House on Sadish. Nina then asks whether she herself gave him any reason to be suspicious of her, and Marie reassures her, saying that Nina behaved perfectly the entire time. She also comments that Kai seemed to possess far too much precise information about the new religious group, and says it almost feels as though he has every important piece of information in the city at his fingertips. Nina then connects this to the anonymous person who sent them information about the group and admits that she is starting to genuinely believe that Kai himself was the informant. She recalls that he only remained anonymous because he said he could not take responsibility if the information turned out to be wrong, and that was practically the only reason he gave. Marie agrees that this is suspicious and adds that the fact Kai never removes his armor only makes everything even stranger. Nina replies that her father is thinking along exactly the same lines and even recalls the conversation where he said that what happened that day was already outside the scope of their original plan. To Nina, all of this was probably part of a larger strategy by Kai to force the enemy into action. And if someone with that much information clearly says it would be better for their parents not to visit his mansion, then something important must certainly be happening. Marie, however, questions how that could even be possible, since to know everything with such precision, Kai would practically have to be infiltrating the situation from the inside. Besides, he has not even been in that city for very long, so something on that level should be impossible. Nina argues that he really had been moving in secret when he rescued her, but Marie counters that it makes no sense to imagine he would go that far just because of them, especially when he already seems far too busy. She continues thinking that if Kai truly put that much effort into helping them, then that would practically make him some kind of saint. And if that really was the case, perhaps they should have insisted even more strongly that he accept the family's treasure. Nina, on the other hand, says that Kai simply is not the kind of person who accepts that sort of reward, and Marie eventually gives in, deeply impressed, concluding that he is far too serious and incredibly admirable. After that, Marie looks at Nina and sincerely tells her that she was saved by a very good person. Nina replies that she has been saying that for a long time, and Marie admits that she is simply realizing it all over again with greater clarity. Soon afterward, the carriage finally stops, and outside, all the guards are standing at the ready with their weapons drawn. Marie looks outside and wonders what is happening, while Nina, seeing her sister's expression suddenly change, grows anxious and says that Marie is starting to scare her. Although nervous herself, Marie hugs her sister and tries to reassure her, saying that everything is fine and she does not need to worry. A knight then stops beside the carriage and knocks on the window to speak with the girls. Marie immediately asks what the situation is, and he explains that thanks to the plan prepared in advance, they managed to resolve the issue involving the new religious group without allowing false rumors to spread. The two girls are relieved by the news and soon afterward return to their parents to report everything that happened. Their first reaction, however, is anything but calm. The moment Nina's father realizes that the two girls have returned carrying part of the gifts, he shouts at them, demanding to know why they brought the rewards back and, even worse, why they returned carrying spare keys to Kai's mansion. Nina's mother also looks at Marie, clearly expecting a good explanation. Marie says she completely understands how the two of them feel. After all, they prepared an enormous reward, ran through countless scenarios for how the meeting might unfold, and on top of that, the problem with the new religious group was resolved without causing any damage to their side. Because of all that, they should have been able to deliver a perfect expression of gratitude to Shikoku. Marie makes it clear that there was simply no way she could do that. Even if her parents want to call it an excuse, she insists that dealing with Kai in that manner was practically impossible. The protagonist saw through her false demeanor almost immediately, and throughout the entire conversation, Marie felt as though she was dancing in the palm of his hand. To her, there is no way to win a battle of words against someone who seems to keep everything completely under control. Her father exchanges a glance with her mother and admits that if even Marie is saying that with such conviction, there is little reason to doubt her. Marie reminds them that they should not be so surprised either, because they already knew what kind of person they were dealing with. In her view, Shikoku truly managed to guide both of them exactly as he wanted throughout that entire meeting. Marie then asks whether, even after hearing her full report, her parents still intend to insist on offering Kai more rewards. Nina's mother confirms without hesitation that they do, since that remains the plan. However, Marie explains that Kai had already anticipated that exact possibility and was very clear about it during their conversation. He said there was absolutely no need for their parents to visit his mansion, and that he would not accept any further expressions of gratitude, so a visit from them would only end up being a waste of time. Nina's father reacts with surprise and asks whether Shikoku truly said something that direct. Marie swears by the gods that he did. She emphasizes that both she and Nina tried to demonstrate the full sincerity of House Ansaj, yet that was still exactly the answer they received. Marie continues by explaining that Kai also said their parents had other things they should be doing. Instead of wasting time going all the way to his home just to thank him again, he would rather they use that time on something that could benefit more of the city. In addition, during the conversation, he also mentioned them becoming stronger. Hearing that part, Nina's father immediately reaches another conclusion. To him, this means that in House Ansaja's current state, the seal they offered still is not useful enough for someone on Shikoku's level. Marie tries to see it in a more positive light and says that perhaps Kai is simply telling them that in the future, they can become strong enough to truly be of use to him. After explaining all of this, she asks whether the two of them finally understand why it was impossible to deliver the so-called perfect thank you. Marie is also impressed by something else. All she did was repeat to her parents exactly what Kai had told her during the meeting, yet those same words worked perfectly to convince them as well. To her, it is almost frightening to imagine that Shikoku can see things so far ahead. In Marie's mind, the feeling during that conversation was practically as if Kai were saying that if House Ansaj was truly prepared to demonstrate its sincerity, then accomplishing something on that level should be easy for them. In the end, Marie summarizes that they were unable to deliver everything their parents wanted, but they at least reached a form of gratitude that both Kai and House Ansaj could accept. Her father acknowledges his daughter's efforts and tells her she did well, while her mother also thanks Marie for her hard work. Before ending her report, Marie remembers one final message. Kai specifically asked her to pass along his thanks to the two of them for all their hard work. On top of that, the fact that he sent Nina and Marie back precisely when the situation involving the religious group was being resolved leaves their parents even more impressed. To them, it seems like yet another demonstration that Shikoku knew exactly when everything would be over. Nina's mother concludes that Kai is definitely the last person she would ever want to make an enemy of. Marie agrees and remarks that when it comes to someone like him, it is not difficult to imagine that he really belongs to Vertar and probably holds a fairly high position within the organization. With the matter of the reward finally settled, Marie asks whether they managed to uncover any information about the true mastermind behind all the trouble. Her mother explains that they did. Everything they learned from the captured members of the new religious group has already been circulated through the city's information channels, and they expect the mastermind to try fleeing the city as soon as he realizes his plan has failed. Marie is surprised and asks why they do not simply go after him immediately. Her father explains that it is not as though they are letting the man escape without doing anything. The problem is that if they completely block every escape route, there is a risk that he will become desperate and attempt some reckless act of revenge against the church's followers or even Shikoku himself. Because of that, completely surrounding the culprit and eliminating every possible means of escape would not necessarily be the smartest decision at that moment. Hearing this, Marie is visibly unsettled as she remembers all the malice that man has already shown and realizes that the problem is not completely over yet. Sometime later at the inn, the owner cannot help asking whether Kai really has no other restaurant where he can eat, since there must surely be more sophisticated options around the city. Kai calmly replies that he likes that place and that fancy restaurants are expensive. The owner admits that he would normally agree with that argument, but points out that considering how much money Kai has, that excuse does not make much sense. The protagonist insists that his sense of money is still perfectly normal, and the owner concludes that the real issue is something else. Kai seems to be the kind of person who would rather spend money on others than on himself. As proof, he brings up the enormous amount of money he received from the protagonist. Kai counters that the money simply had to be paid because it was compensation for helping hide him, and thinks that if the Holy Church had not rewarded him with money, he probably would not have been able to give the man anything at all. Changing the subject slightly, the innkeeper says he has a complaint for someone like Kai. Curious, the protagonist asks what the problem is, and the man reveals that rumors have started spreading around the city, claiming that the two of them are on equal footing. To make matters worse, some people are now treating the innkeeper as Shikoku's personal informant and spreading all kinds of absurd stories about him, leaving the man completely at a loss over what to do. Kai simply laughs and says the two of them will have to suffer through it together, but the owner makes it clear that he does not find it funny at all. Still suspicious, he asks whether Kai is planning something behind the scenes, perhaps having foreseen this entire situation and already started moving pieces somewhere. The protagonist immediately denies it, but the man clearly does not believe him and complains that just thinking about it is already making his stomach hurt, convinced that Kai must be doing something in secret. Internally, he genuinely begins wondering what else is going to happen from that point onward. Hearing the complaint about his stomach, Kai mentions that he has some medicine stored at home, including the kind that cures everything, and even offers to give him one. As he speaks, he remembers the same potion he used when saving Nina and the others, giving them only the amount they needed. The innkeeper freezes when he hears that and asks whether Kai is seriously talking about medicine capable of curing anything. The protagonist confirms it and explains that it is the same medicine used to heal Nina's eyes, so he can fully guarantee its effectiveness. The man asks him to wait a moment because he is not sure whether he is thinking of the right potion. But if Kai really means the universal elixir, there is absolutely no way anyone should use something like that just to treat a stomachache. Kai replies that this is precisely the measure of his gratitude, making the innkeeper beg him to stop being so grateful. Confused, Kai asks why, and the man admits that this level of gratitude simply terrifies him. Still in disbelief, he asks why Kai even continues to possess an item like that, and worse, whether he really carries such things around with him. Before the subject can go any further, Kai remembers something else he wanted to give him. The owner immediately starts panicking and begs him not to give him anything, but the protagonist explains that he never truly finished thanking him for hiding him and that by giving him this, he can finally consider the debt completely settled. Kai then places a bag containing 2,030,000 regal on the counter, producing a heavy thud that only disturbs the innkeeper even more. The man looks at the amount and says that without meaning any offense, he simply cannot accept it, because in his view, Kai has already repaid him far more than necessary. The protagonist says he understands that feeling perfectly, but asks what the man thinks would happen if he refused to take the money. The owner asks what exactly would happen, and Kai replies that he is not the right person to answer that. Completely confused and increasingly frightened, the man eventually gives in and says he will accept it because now he is more afraid of what might happen if he refuses. Kai feels relieved and thanks him, while the innkeeper realizes that he has only gotten himself even more deeply involved in that relationship. Before Kai leaves, the man calls out to him one more time and tells him to be careful about that matter, commenting that the protagonist seems to spend his days walking around carrying enormous amounts of money with him. Kai does not understand exactly what he means, but the owner soon drops the concern and remarks that, in Kai's case, any thief would probably just get beaten up anyway. After that, Kai leaves the inn while the owner remains alone, nervously staring at the enormous bag of money he just received. Elsewhere, however, the situation is far more serious. It is revealed that the Holy Church was established under House Ansage, and its rise ended up pushing aside ancient beliefs created by the ancestors of other groups. To tarnish the church's reputation and weaken its power, the new religious organization had formed a mutually beneficial relationship with the Red-Freed criminal syndicate. But now one of the group's members erupts in anger upon learning that the plan failed, demanding to know how that could have happened when they had received information directly from Red-Freed. One of the group's members, a reddish brown-haired woman, nervously replies that, from what they managed to discover, nearly all of their information was leaked, and the church's forces had apparently been waiting behind the cathedral the entire time. The gray-haired woman concludes that they were completely manipulated and that their enemies have probably already extracted everything they could from their captured companions. To make matters worse, all the people and resources the group had acquired through money were lost as well, turning this into the worst possible outcome, and she wonders exactly where the plan started going wrong. The same woman then states that there is no way House Ansage could have prepared all of this by itself. The reddish brown-haired woman mentions a rumor she recently heard, saying that this time the family received help from a Vertar agent known as Shikoku. The woman with her hair tied back immediately reacts and asks whether they are talking about the same man who ruined Red-Freed's kidnapping plan. The reddish brown-haired woman confirms it, explaining that Red-Freed held a grudge against Kai because of that incident and therefore provided the group with various pieces of information about him, although apparently not even the criminals expected things to turn out this way. The blonde man is troubled by all of this and asks whether no one else finds the situation strange. After all, if they were deliberately lured into a trap, that means someone knew both their plan and the information supplied by Red-Freed. He then raises a disturbing possibility, suggesting that perhaps one of Shikoku's informants is infiltrating their group. The gray-haired woman tells him to stop, saying that this is already turning into paranoia, while the reddish-brown-haired woman agrees that everyone there gathered precisely because they share a common enemy. However, the woman with her hair tied back counters that talking like that and trying to control the discussion only makes the two of them look suspicious as well. The blonde man becomes angry and asks what she means by that, nearly causing the argument to spiral out of control. The gray-haired woman intervenes and tells everyone to calm down, warning them not to let Shikoku make them turn against one another. After bringing the argument under control, the reddish-brown-haired woman reveals that, in her opinion, the person who hurt their group the most this time was the informant connected to Shikoku. The blonde man asks about this informant, and she explains that she heard a rumor that very day about the owner of an inn called LD, who apparently has a very close relationship with Kai. She adds that she even heard the innkeeper received gifts of gratitude in Shikoku's name. The woman with her hair tied back quickly connects the dots and concludes that if Kai obtained information through that man and then used it to help House and Saj set up the trap, the entire situation begins to make sense. The blonde man considers it humiliating, while the gray-haired woman simply remains deep in thought. The reddish-brown-haired woman then reveals that Red Freed left them one final request. Before abandoning the city, they're supposed to attack at least one person close to Shikoku, causing trouble and putting pressure on him so that he has to divide his attention. In return, Red Freed would show its gratitude by helping bring down House Ansaj later. The gray-haired woman begins to smile and thinks that they would have no chance against Shikoku directly, but attacking the owner of a small inn should be much easier. Even so, the reddish-brown-haired woman continues to have a terrible feeling about the whole thing and suggests that perhaps it would be better to simply run away. The blonde man tries to reassure her, saying they do not intend to do anything beyond causing a little trouble and that, besides, they will act during the night. The woman with her hair tied back also decides to take part, saying that since they are all planning to flee the city anyway, they might as well finish off the innkeeper before they leave. Although she remains uneasy, the reddish-brown-haired woman admits inwardly that she wants revenge just as much as any of them. After all, the group has just had a plan that took years to prepare completely destroyed, and she feels that she cannot simply accept that without doing anything, convincing herself that they need to take some kind of action and that, if they earn Redfried's favor, they can let the criminal organization destroy House and Saj for them in the future. The group finally decides to move. With everyone ready to leave, the short-haired woman ends the discussion and tells them to stop sitting around because it is time to put the plan into action. Meanwhile, after leaving the inn, Kai walks alone through the streets at night and begins seriously thinking about LD's warning. He does not really understand what the owner meant when he told him to be careful and commented that in Kai's case, he would probably end up turning the tables on anyone who tried something. The more he thinks about it, the more the protagonist starts wondering whether someone is actually after him. And if he had known that was a possibility, he never would have left the inn so late at night. Kai even complains inwardly that LD could have explained that much sooner, since now he is already too far away to simply turn back. He thinks he should have stayed there, but also feels that returning now would be strange, and tries to convince himself that he probably would not be attacked that easily. Probably. Still worried, Kai draws his sword, producing an absurdly loud sound, and thinks that if someone sees him like that, they might end up giving away his presence. On the other hand, he concludes that his intimidating appearance could also work in his favor, since any suspicious person would probably prefer to leave him alone after seeing him like that. But shortly afterward, as he crosses a stone bridge, Kai notices 4 hooded figures standing ahead, none other than the blonde man and the 3 women from the new religious group. One of the women immediately recognizes Shikoku and is shocked, while Kai instantly realizes that the situation is terrible. Judging by their reaction, the protagonist concludes that he has run into exactly the people who might be after him and desperately begins trying to think of something he can say to frighten them and eliminate any desire they might have to fight. Trying to adopt a threatening posture, Kai thinks that they have finally decided to appear with those dangerous intentions, but wonders whether they really intend to face him with only 4 people because that would be underestimating him far too much. Suddenly, one of the women becomes furious and demands that he stop looking down on them, shouting that their entire plan was destroyed because of him. Kai tries to say that it is all a misunderstanding, but the blonde man immediately tells him to stop talking nonsense. Realizing that the situation is getting worse, one of the women apologizes to her companions for dragging them into trouble because of Shikoku once again, and tells the other 3 to run while she buys them some time. However, no one agrees to abandon their companion. One of them replies that there is no need to hold back anymore, since they have already come this far and will see it through to the end, while another also decides to stay. In the end, the group concludes that there is no turning back now, unless they manage to defeat Kai. The protagonist panics when he realizes that no one intends to run and tries to stop everything before the fight begins, asking them to talk first and insisting that there is a huge misunderstanding. The woman at the front, however, only becomes even angrier and asks how he has the nerve to say that, while still holding his own weapon, reminding him that Shikoku was the one who took a combat stance first. Kai realizes that there is no longer any simple way out of the situation, and, unable to convince anyone, concludes that he will have to resolve it the same way he would inside the game. The protagonist then begins charging an equipment skill called Last Second Critical, and the change in his stance immediately makes all four of them react. The woman leading the group warns the others to prepare for the attack, and each of them begins activating their own abilities, using defensive magic, magic amplification, physical enhancement, and even high-level physical enhancement. Seeing the scene unfold before his eyes, Kai recognizes exactly the same formation he used to encounter when playing the game. Under different circumstances, seeing something like that in person might have been exciting, but at that moment, the tension is so intense that Kai can barely enjoy the experience. The skill he is preparing belongs to the black sword, Dira Hand, and requires a full 15 seconds of charging. While keeping the weapon ready and feeling energy gather around it, the protagonist makes one final attempt to avoid the fight, asking whether, even at this point, they really have no intention of listening to him. One of the women replies that Kai should stop saying things even he does not believe. The protagonist continues counting the seconds in his head as the energy builds, and once he realizes that no one intends to back down, he warns them that whatever happens from that point onward, they should not blame him. At that moment, one of the women gives the signal to attack, although another realizes too late that this may be a terrible idea. Three members charge at Kai together, but just as they enter the sword's range, the charging period ends. Kai activates Last Second Critical and unleashes a single strike. A wave of energy tears across the bridge in front of him, catching all four completely off guard and forcing them backward. One of the women still reacts in shock, but it is already too late as the attack engulfs the entire group and violently sends them flying. The force of the blow does not stop with the enemies and ends up striking the stone bridge itself, destroying a huge section of the structure and sending debris crashing into the water below. Kai looks at the destruction and immediately panics, thinking that things turned out far worse than he expected. The thunderous noise draws the attention of nearby residents, who begin approaching and asking what the hell happened, while the four cult members remain sprawled out and dazed among the shattered pieces of the bridge. With all those people watching, Kai can only think that this really was not his fault. By the next day, however, the story has already spread throughout the city in a completely different form. Rumors claim that a group attempted to ambush Eldi, the innkeeper connected to Shikoku, only to be intercepted on the stone bridge by Kai himself. People also say that Shikoku destroyed the entire bridge with a single strike, and that the four attackers had connections to Red Freed, the same organization responsible for Nina's kidnapping. As the investigation progresses, it is also discovered that the new religious group had been working together with Red Freed to weaken House Ansage and strip away its influence over the Holy Church. Even the interrogators responsible for questioning the four captured attackers reach a frightening conclusion after examining the outcome of that night. If Shikoku considers someone his enemy, he simply destroys them without hesitation. As a result, besides the details of the incident rapidly spreading throughout the city, another message begins to gain even more traction among the people. Shikoku is someone who must never be provoked or angered. While the rumors about the confrontation on the bridge spread throughout the city, Nina wonders whether Shikoku really managed to capture those criminals in the end, and whether the mastermind he had supposedly been pursuing was among them. Marie, on the other hand, is thrilled and comments that this was exactly what she would expect from Shikoku, while the vice captain admits that he really is capable of accomplishing absurd things. Marie then remembers the bridge that was destroyed during the confrontation and asks whether Kai will have to cover the entire repair cost himself, but the vice captain assures her that there is no reason to worry. After all, it was clear that he was attacked first, and destroying part of the bridge became unavoidable if he wanted to defend himself while ensuring that all four enemies were captured. Even so, Marie still finds it incredible that someone could cause that much destruction, commenting that when it comes to Shikoku, she would have expected him to resolve the situation much more cleanly. Nina agrees that it does seem strange, and the two look toward the vice captain. She then adds an important piece of information. The people behind that incident apparently had ties to Red Freed. Nina is surprised, and the guard says there is practically no doubt about it. She then makes it clear that what comes next is only her personal interpretation, but she believes Kai deliberately went that far this time to take revenge for everything Red Freed had already done and at the same time send a direct warning to the organization, almost as if telling them never to try something like that again. In the vice captain's view, Redfried tried to use that new religious group they had been cultivating as an important piece in bringing down House and Saj. But in Shikoku's hands, the entire structure they had built was dismantled, and its power stripped away all at once. Hearing that explanation, Marie becomes even more captivated and comments that Kai simply keeps doing the most incredible things, even saying that being praised by someone on his level is something she could be proud of for the rest of her life. Nina notices that her sister is starting to loosen up too much again and thinks that her usual composure is slipping. Marie, now completely absorbed in the subject, regrets not taking advantage of their meeting to ask whether Kai has a girlfriend. Nina reacts immediately and tells her sister not to steal her shikoku, but Marie fires back that Nina is in no position to say that when the spare key to the mansion keeps disappearing from wherever it is supposed to be stored, directly asking whether Nina is secretly taking it. Nina pretends to be innocent and says she has no idea what her sister is talking about, but the vice captain joins the conversation and advises Lady Nina to be a little more honest. Marie uses the opportunity to pressure her even further, saying that Nina was probably planning to sneak off alone to visit Shikoku's estate at some point. Nina immediately denies it and says she would never cause him that kind of inconvenience, before awkwardly admitting that, in truth, she only takes the key so she can place it beside her pillow and sleep with it. Marie is left speechless for a moment and asks what kind of behavior that is, concluding that Nina is completely in love with Shikoku. Nina turns red and shoots back that Marie is exactly the same, leaving the two sisters arguing while the vice captain simply watches the scene and silently thinks about the man at the center of all that commotion. Meanwhile, far away and completely unaware of the interpretations, rumors, and even the sisters' argument, Kai calmly walks through the city carrying a box of freshly purchased bread and sweets, simply thanking the shopkeeper sincerely for his purchase before continuing on his way. The following afternoon, the maid remarks that Kai truly is capable of doing unbelievable things, and, speaking completely honestly, thinks he was rather ruthless this time. The protagonist tries to explain that he never intended for any of that to happen, but she admits that she always imagined her master would eventually do something similar. She simply did not expect it to happen so soon. Kai can only complain about that interpretation, and changing the subject thanks her for taking care of all the trouble after the incident. The maid, however, interprets his gratitude differently and asks whether Kai destroyed that particular bridge specifically to test her ability to solve problems, pointing out that it is not part of any major transportation route, and therefore its destruction does not seriously interfere with the city's operation. Kai quickly denies ever thinking about anything like that, and the woman accepts his answer before asking permission to pose just one question. She wants to know how Kai evaluates the way she handled the entire situation and asks him to point out any mistakes if there was anything lacking in her response. With no real criticism to offer, and above all relieved that he was not dragged out of his room to personally deal with the bureaucracy, Kai replies that she handled everything perfectly. The maid is visibly relieved by the praise and asks whether she may continue dealing with the case as his representative, and the protagonist immediately agrees. Internally, Kai thinks that he did not even know the four people who attacked him belonged to that new religious group, much less that they had connections to a criminal organization, so he cannot understand why everyone keeps acting as though he had anything to do with the whole situation. To make matters worse, he still has no idea why he was attacked in the middle of the night. Taking the opportunity, Kai changes the subject and says that he also has something he wants to ask. The maid prepares to listen, and the protagonist finally brings up the issue that kept him from sleeping the previous night, asking how much he will have to pay for the bridge he destroyed. To his surprise, the woman replies that he does not have to pay anything at all. Kai asks if she is serious, and the maid explains that they presented the case as an unavoidable act of self-defense, in which Kai had to cause that damage to ensure his own safety while also capturing every enemy. The protagonist is impressed that they managed to settle the matter so easily, but she clarifies that it was not actually that simple. Several nobles protested heavily, arguing that someone capable of casually destroying a bridge could hardly claim that doing so was absolutely necessary to capture only a few opponents, while also questioning whether the incident should instead be classified as excessive self-defense. Even so, in the end, everyone approves the decision after the maid asks just one question, whether they are claiming that Lord Shikoku is lying. Kai grows uncomfortable and remarks that it sounds a little like a threat, but she insists that it was merely a confirmation. The protagonist tries to explain that, the way she phrased it, it sounds more like, "Are you really sure you want to cause trouble with him?" But the maid calmly repeats that there was no threat whatsoever, only a confirmation. Not daring to press the issue any further, Kai simply accepts it. Since the matter has now been officially settled, she believes no one should question him about the incident again, but asks him to inform her immediately if that happens, because she will need to take certain measures. In addition, if any urgent action becomes necessary, she intends to contact House Ansage of the Holy Church. The maid further explains that the repair costs will be covered entirely by the three great powers, although House Ansage is taking the lead on the reconstruction. Kai starts to feel that all of this looks dangerously similar to using overwhelming authority to pressure anyone who dares to complain, but decides to convince himself that he is probably just imagining things. Wanting to at least know how the damage he caused is being handled, he asks whether repairs have already begun, and the maid confirms that they have. Since magic is being used in the reconstruction, everything should be finished by the following day. Kai then decides to follow through on something he mentioned that morning and personally bring some refreshments and sweets to the workers. The maid asks whether she should call a messenger again to handle it for him, but Kai refuses, saying that he wants to take care of whatever he can by himself. Internally, he thinks it would look terrible if he simply sat around in the mansion, acting like some important figure, while intimidating authorities handled everything for him. Since Kai considers himself a completely ordinary person, he wants to rely on that kind of power as little as possible. The maid comments that this attitude suits him and asks what he plans to do about his equipment. Kai replies that he will naturally go out wearing his armor, and she accepts the decision, merely asking him to be careful outside. Before leaving, the protagonist thanks her once again for all her help, catching the maid slightly off guard. The moment he reaches the streets, however, Kai realizes the problem. People's stares seem to pierce straight through him. He chose to wear the armor because there is still a chance he could be attacked again. But now he understands how it must look to the residents. From their perspective, the man who just destroyed a bridge and caused the city an enormous headache is casually strolling through the streets as though nothing happened. Kai wishes someone had gently pointed this out beforehand, though he admits that the previous night he did not even have the mental capacity to think that far ahead. As he walks, he starts apologizing to everyone in his head, insisting that he did not destroy the bridge on purpose and that those people simply appeared out of nowhere and attacked him. The real problem was that his sword was simply too sharp and too powerful. Even so, he concludes that he needs to do everything possible not to frighten anyone else, and, above all, avoid giving the impression that he has become arrogant after everything that happened. To improve his image a little, he decides to buy the best refreshments possible for the workers. Kai then remembers the sweets Karen and Lifia had previously brought him, with each box costing around 50,000 regul. The price hurts just thinking about it, but he considers it a necessary expense and heads to the upscale confectionery responsible for those sweets. The moment he enters, an employee is startled at the sight of him and can barely welcome him inside before asking him to wait for a moment. Kai immediately realizes that she must know the entire story about the destroyed bridge. Shortly afterwards, the manager herself comes out to greet him personally, welcoming Lord Shikoku with tremendous respect and thanking him for the honor of his visit. Kai awkwardly responds while internally assuming that they are treating him this way because everyone must think he might destroy the shop too if something goes wrong. Being greeted directly by the manager only reinforces his impression that he has already been branded as someone dangerous. The manager, meanwhile, tries to understand what brought Shikoku to the establishment, and Kai explained that he would like to purchase 3 of the shop's most popular sweets, only to change his mind halfway through and increase the order to 5. The woman immediately accepts and says she will escort him to a private room in the back where he can wait comfortably while the products are prepared and packaged. Kai tries to say that he does not mind waiting right there, but the manager insists that he use the room, leaving the protagonist with no choice but to accept. Kai is impressed by the level of service at such a high-end establishment and follows the woman into the back. Upon entering, he finds an extremely luxurious room and comments on how elaborate the place is. The manager thanks him for the compliment and asks him to take a seat while he waits. Kai complies but panics internally when he realizes that he has been placed in a room clearly reserved for VIP customers. The manager even asks whether he would like anything to drink or some sweets while he waits. But Kai politely declines, thinking that in an atmosphere like that, he would not be able to swallow anything anyway. Unable to contain his curiosity, he asks whether he is really allowed to stay there, since the room looks like it is meant only for the shop's most important regular customers. The manager confirms that the room exists specifically to receive their most valued clients, but explains that Guildmaster Panlard recently issued an order to every affiliated establishment. Kai asks what kind of order it was, and she reveals that if Lord Shikoku appeared at any of their shops, he was to receive the best treatment possible. The protagonist is completely lost since he does not even recognize the name Panlard and starts imagining that perhaps the man issued the order simply to avoid angering him and prevent him from destroying one of their establishments like he did the bridge. The manager then adds that there is a second instruction. If Shikoku appears, they are to contact Panlard immediately. Kai nervously asks why and she explains that Lord Panlord or one of his associates may personally come to meet him, since his estate is not very far from there. The protagonist freezes when he hears that. Completely unprepared mentally to meet yet another powerful and intimidating figure, he asks them to bring the sweets as quickly as possible and even promises a tip if they can speed up the service. The manager replies that she will do her best, but warns that it will still take some time because the products need to be properly inspected. Kai immediately suspects that she is deliberately stalling to keep him there until that authority figure arrives, sending him into even greater panic. But before he can think of a way to escape, an excited voice suddenly comes from outside, shouting that she finally found him. Kai turns toward the door in alarm, and in the next instant, Remy appears, bursting with excitement and announcing that she has arrived. She runs into the room and practically throws herself at Kai before he can even understand what is happening. The protagonist catches her and asks why she is there, while one of the confectionery employees desperately apologizes for the intrusion. The manager, however, says that there is no problem, and Remy explains that she received word that Kai had appeared at that shop and immediately came to see him. The protagonist understands how she managed to find him so quickly and takes the opportunity to ask whether she has some connection to the establishment or the organization that runs it. Remy casually replies that her father is the leader and is in charge of the merchant guilds. Kai nearly faints upon hearing that, while the girl continues looking at him as though it were nothing unusual. The protagonist then concludes that this explains how she managed to enter such an exclusive room without any difficulty and asks where her parents are. Before that, however, he politely calls her Miss Remy, prompting the girl to ask him to simply call her Remy because he is special. Kai grows uncomfortable and says he cannot just address her that way, but she insists that since it is him, it is perfectly fine. Internally, the protagonist goes on alert once again, remembering that he needs to keep his true circumstances hidden, because if anyone discovers that behind that entire reputation is nothing more than an ordinary person, his own life could end up in danger. He then returns to his question and asks where Remy's parents are, but she simply replies that she does not know. The girl explains that she received a report from a maid informing her that Shikoku was at that shop and immediately rushed out to find him. Kai then realizes that Remy truly came alone and asks whether she traveled all that way without anyone accompanying her. The girl proudly asks whether that is not impressive. Kai does not really understand and replies that he does not know, prompting Remy to insist that he make it sound impressive. Not wanting to get caught up in that logic, the protagonist simply says that he is glad to see her looking so healthy. As he watches the energetic girl, he remembers the universal elixir he used to save her, and concludes that, seeing Remy like this, using the potion was definitely worth it. Next, Kai asks her to move back a little, but Remy simply refuses. At that moment, the manager returns with his purchases and informs him that the 5 sets of sweets he selected cost a total of 200,000 regal. In addition, because they took up some of Lord Shikoku's valuable time, the establishment has prepared an extra gift as an apology. Kai accepts the gift and thanks her, but inwardly he is shaken by the realization that he just spent 200,000 on sweets alone. Remy asks if he really likes sweets that much, and Kai explains that he is not buying all of them for himself, since he plans to give them away as gifts after everything that happened. The girl immediately sums it up by saying that he destroyed a bridge, prompting Kai to defend himself and say that technically he did not destroy the bridge, it merely ended up breaking. The protagonist then prepares to pay, but Remy notices and turns to the manager, whose name is Diva, telling her that she will take care of the rest. Diva immediately understands and simply asks Lady Remy to inform the guildmaster that the payment must be settled by the end of the month. Remy agrees without hesitation, but Kai immediately intervenes and says no because he intends to pay for the purchase himself. Remy simply answers no. Kai responds with another no, this time even more firmly, making it clear that this is completely out of the question because inwardly he does not want to owe anyone a favor for something he is perfectly capable of paying for himself. Remy, however, ignores his resistance and calls Diva over again. The manager confirms that since Lady Remy has decided to cover the payment, the shop cannot accept any money from Lord Shikoku and respectfully asks for his understanding. Kai is left speechless by the way the two of them simply settled everything without giving him any opening to argue and thinks that, as expected of someone raised in a merchant family, Remy knows how to use her position even more effectively than Karen and Nina. No matter how he looks at it, the protagonist considers the move completely unfair, while Remy looks pleased with her victory. Kai then thinks that at times like this, the girl really can seem far more mature than she usually acts. Remy explains where she learned it, saying that her father always teaches her that if someone is a merchant, they should sell as many favors to other people as possible. Both the manager and Kai are surprised by how openly she says it, and he advises her that at the very least, she should never repeat that lesson out loud to anyone else from now on. Remy simply agrees and says she will not say it anymore. Still making one final attempt, Kai asks Diva if she really will not accept his money, but the manager apologizes and confirms that she cannot. Seeing no possible way to defeat the pair, the protagonist finally gives up and says he will gratefully accept the kindness, thanking Remy. Internally, he admits that he would love to keep arguing, but realizes that against those two, he would only be wasting his energy. Now that he has the sweets, Kai decides to leave and announces that he is heading out. Remy immediately asks where he is going, and the protagonist explains that he intends to deliver the gifts. In truth, he also wants to get out of there as quickly as possible because if he stays any longer, there is a very real chance that Remy's father will personally show up after receiving word that Shikoku is at the store. Remy then decides that she will accompany him, leaving Kai confused as to why she needs to come along as well. The protagonist thinks he is already drawing far too much attention while walking around the city after the bridge incident, and if he starts wandering around beside the daughter of the merchant guildmaster, he cannot even imagine what kind of ridiculous rumors will appear next. Because of that, he tries to tell her that she really does not need to come with him, but Remy replies that Kai said he would protect her that day. The protagonist freezes, unable to remember ever making such a promise, and then realizes something else, asking if that is exactly why she came there without any guards. Remy happily confirms it and even reveals that she sent her own carriage back. Kai panics internally because he is certain he never made that promise, and worse, he does not even trust his own ability to protect someone so important. Remy, however, once again asks whether what she did was impressive and adds that this way, the two of them will be able to spend plenty of time together. No longer knowing how to react, Kai eventually admits that perhaps she was a little impressive. Remy looks completely satisfied with the answer and settles even closer to him, while the protagonist can only wonder once again how the hell he ended up in this situation. Before Kai leaves the confectionery, Diva says goodbye to Remy and asks her to pass along her regards to Guildmaster Panlard. The manager also thanks Shikoku for visiting and says that she hopes they can continue to enjoy his patronage in the future. Kai responds politely and thinks that if he ever needs to bring gifts or refreshments to someone again, he might actually buy from there another time. With that, the manager bids them farewell and watches the two leave. As soon as they step outside the shop, however, Remy begins looking at him with a sad expression. She stares intently at the protagonist's hand, and when he notices, he asks what that look means, wondering if something is wrong. The girl then holds out her hand and says that Kai may hold it. When he does not react immediately, Remy repeats that she is allowing him to hold her hand and finally adds that she is making a special exception just for him. Kai does not understand why she is acting as though she is doing him some enormous favor, but starts thinking that perhaps it really would be better for them to walk hand in hand, especially in less crowded places. After all, regardless of her appearance and age, Remy is still the daughter of an extremely important family, so while he is responsible for her, he needs to treat her carefully in any potentially dangerous place so he does not end up being blamed if something happens. Remy, for her part, warns that she might wander off even in a crowded place, and that she will not take responsibility if Kai ends up losing sight of her. The protagonist stares at her in disbelief and asks whether she is so desperate to hold his hand that she has resorted to threatening him, but Remy simply asks if he has a problem with it. Kai ultimately gives in, thinking that since he is the one who needs to protect her, perhaps he should even be grateful for her cooperation. He then extends his armored hand and tells Remy to hold it. The girl touches it but immediately complains that it is hard. Kai replies that armor would not be very useful if it were soft and decides to reverse things, saying that he will hold her hand instead. Remy looks at the enormous metal hand and remarks that it seems painful, prompting Kai to threaten to give up and let go of her. However, she reminds him that if he does that, she might wander away again and asks whether he would really feel comfortable with that possibility. Left with no alternative, Kai simply tells her to endure it for a while, and Remy finally agrees. He then comments that she suddenly became surprisingly cooperative. Remy explains that she thought it over and decided that this solution would be a compromise. Kai is almost impressed that she understands the concept, but Remy reveals that she learned that from her father as well, since he always taught her that knowing how to make concessions is important for a merchant and that things usually work out when you remember that. The protagonist acknowledges that she really did receive a very thorough education, and Remy explains that this was also because her body used to be very weak. Since she could not go outside to play, studying became one of the few ways she could pass the time because it was something she could still do even while staying in bed. The answer weighs on Kai a little, but as he watches Remy walking energetically beside him, happily swinging their arms while holding his hand, he ends up feeling genuinely happy. If she spent most of her life unable to play freely every day, then it is perfectly understandable that she now wants to sneak out of the house and explore the city by herself whenever possible. Even so, Kai comments that now that she can do all kinds of fun things, she's probably starting to hate studying even more, but advises her to keep putting in the effort because learning is something she is unlikely to regret in the future. Remy replies without hesitation that she would rather play every day, and Kai says she can play as much as she wants after finishing her responsibilities. The girl complains that he is saying exactly the same thing as everyone else, but Kai asks her not to make that face, explaining that those people say such things precisely because they care about her. Internally, however, he imagines that Remy has probably heard the same thing so many times that she must be tired of it by now. As they continue walking, Kai starts thinking about the girl's physical stamina and asks whether walking every day does not become exhausting after spending almost her entire life indoors, especially since even a simple change in environment can drain quite a bit of energy. Remy asks if she can say something, and when Kai gives her permission, she calmly admits that she is already starting to get tired. The protagonist is startled, saying that was far too fast, and asks whether she had perhaps assumed they would be traveling by carriage. Remy shamelessly confirms that she had, leaving Kai completely awkward. He sincerely apologizes and explains that he almost never uses carriages, so the possibility did not even cross his mind. Remy says she is still fine, but Kai decides it would be better to find a carriage while she still has some energy left, since they are not in any hurry. The girl, however, assures him that there is no need, because if she reaches the point where she can no longer walk, Kai can simply carry her on his back like he did that other time. The protagonist comments that a carriage would clearly be better, but Remy replies that she would rather be carried. Not knowing how to argue with that, Kai simply asks her to let him know when she truly reaches her limit, thinking that he needs to keep a close eye on her condition, so he does not realize too late that she needs help. A short while later, Remy announces that she's already tired, and Kai immediately notices that she still has plenty of energy left and asks whether she is not simply trying to get a piggyback ride earlier than necessary. After all, the universal elixir should have completely restored her health, and he also believes that, for the sake of her future, it would be better not to treat her like someone fragile all the time. Remy eventually gives in and admits that she can walk a little farther. Kai then wonders whether it is just his imagination, because she does not seem bothered by the situation in the slightest. In the end, however, Remy's persistence wins, and before the two even reach the destroyed bridge, Kai is already carrying the girl on his back as they make their way through the city together. When Kai finally approaches the bridge with Remy on his back, the people in charge of the reconstruction notice the two coming and immediately panic. A subordinate rushes over to his boss and warns her that the situation is terrible because the so-called God of Destruction is approaching together with none other than the young lady of the Alblera family. The company responsible for the repairs is Melandum, known for using magic to carry out restorations with great speed and maximum efficiency. And its chief executive, Oliva, cannot understand what kind of absurd combination she is looking at. On one side is Shikoku, now known as the man who destroyed the bridge, accompanied by Remy, daughter of one of the three great families and one of the very people involved in financing the repairs. Since no one received any warning about the visit, Oliva begins to worry, and one of her subordinates raises the worst possibility. Perhaps the two appeared without notice to check whether Melandum was cutting corners on materials or performing work below the expected standard, essentially carrying out a surprise inspection. Especially since Lady Remy is among the sponsors of the project, Oliva becomes irritated and insists that they would never be stupid enough to cut costs on a job like this, forcing the subordinate to ask her to calm down. Despite all the prestige and achievements Melandum has accumulated, Oliva knows that the two people approaching have enough influence to easily destroy the company if something goes wrong, so she decides there is no choice but to receive them personally. Inwardly, the woman considers the scene practically the worst possible scenario, comparing Kai to a man carrying a bomb while also carrying on his back a girl capable of acting as both the flame and the detonator. Before going out to greet them, Oliva makes a drastic decision and orders every worker, including the subordinate standing in front of her, to use mana infusion throughout the rest of the reconstruction. The man is shocked, reminding her that this was never part of the plan and that if they do this, they will practically lose all the profit from the job. Worse still, with the number of employees currently available, they do not even have enough mana to maintain the technique for very long. Oliva tells them to simply endure it and promises to immediately prepare recovery potions to compensate for the consumption. Mana infusion is a technique that coats an object in a uniform layer of hardening magic. By saturating the structure with mana, it can be made far more durable than normal, but the cost is an enormous amount of magical energy. In Oliva's mind, however, this practically confirms that they are facing a surprise inspection, so it is far safer to deliver work of a quality far above what was contracted and leave a good impression. When the subordinate still shows some resistance, she promises bonuses for everyone and even a party once the work is finished. With little choice, the man agrees and calls the other workers over. The team gathers and reacts in shock when they hear about the sudden change, but soon everyone returns to work and begins channeling mana through their hands, applying mana infusion directly to the bridge stones to reinforce the reconstruction far beyond what had originally been planned. Only after making sure her order is being carried out does Oliva finally go to receive the visitors. Even then, the moment she stands before Kai and Remy, she nearly loses her composure. Remy, despite belonging to the Alblera family, does not appear to pose any immediate danger. But Shikoku is another story. Rumors say he even has the great powers of the three great families under his influence. And at that moment, Oliva feels an even more threatening presence coming from him than she imagined. She even wonders whether Kai's armor contains some kind of item capable of reacting to the emotions of those nearby and increasing that pressure. Trying to stay calm, she decides to focus her attention on Remy and reminds herself that, for better or worse, she is the chief executive of Malandam, a company that has earned considerable trust and achieved strong results in that city. Only then does she gather her courage, approach the two, and formally introduce herself to Lady Remy and Lord Shikoku. Kai responds with a simple greeting, while Remy does the same in a casual manner. Oliva then explains that she is the chief executive of Malandam, responsible for the project, receiving only another short greeting from Kai. To her, that minimal response feels like a terrifying display of power, as though Shikoku has no need whatsoever to reveal his intentions or offer any information to someone beneath him. Because of that, she inwardly gives thanks that Remy is there. Even though she is convinced that Kai will never answer honestly, Oliva gathers her courage and asks what brought Lord Shikoku to the construction site, all while mentally cursing that armor for making his expressions impossible to read. Kai replies that he has no particular business there, and explains that he simply came to deliver some sweets and refreshments to the workers. Oliva repeats the word in confusion, and the protagonist adds that since he was the one who caused all that trouble with the bridge, he wanted to at least offer those things as a form of apology. The woman politely thanks him for his consideration, but inwardly she immediately begins searching for some hidden motive. Then her eyes fall on the boxes, and she recognizes the symbol of the famous Leland confectionery. Oliva is shocked when she realizes that these are top-quality sweets sold for tens of thousands of regal per box, and that Kai brought no fewer than 5 boxes, totaling several hundred thousand. Completely unaware of the panic he has caused, Kai simply says that this was the entire reason for his visit, apologizes again for interrupting their work, and prepares to leave. Remy cheerfully says goodbye as well, leaving Oliva standing there in complete shock. The chief executive begins wondering whether Kai really managed to inspect the entire project in such a short amount of time, but quickly realizes that would be impossible. Then, an even worse conclusion occurs to her. Perhaps he truly came there only to deliver refreshments, without any ulterior motive at all. If that is the case, then all the extra mana infusion she just ordered was completely unnecessary. The problem is that she can no longer simply cancel the order, because if the real reason for backing down came to light, the reputation Malandam spent years building could collapse. The more Oliva thinks about the situation, the more another absurd possibility begins to take shape in her mind. Perhaps this was Shikoku's goal from the very beginning. By spending only a few 100,000 regal on refreshments, he would have managed to pressure Malandam into providing, free of charge, a mana infusion that would add several million to the cost of the project. In her mind, Kai has just forced an extremely favorable negotiation against a company that did not even owe him anything, and apparently did so without knowing anything about his opponent. Unable to accept that someone could manipulate her like that, Oliva feels her professional pride flare up and decides that she cannot simply stand by after being defeated in such a way. Determined to respond somehow, she calls out to Lady Remy before the two can leave, causing both the girl and Kai to turn around, curious about what Oliva still wants. Oliva realizes that keeping mana infusion active for hours during the reconstruction will require an enormous amount of energy and, consequently, many recovery potions. Luckily, standing right in front of her is Remy, daughter of the man who leads the merchant guilds and one of the people with immediate access to that kind of merchandise. Remy then asks what the woman wants, and Oliva, apologizing for the sudden request, asks whether Remy could arrange through the guild 10 complete mana recovery potions and 50 medium magic recovery potions, totaling 60 bottles to be transported to the construction site as quickly as possible. Remy agrees without any difficulty and says she will have the 10 and the 50 prepared immediately, Taking advantage of the fact that she was already about to return home, Oliva thanks her profusely for the help and is impressed by how easily the girl handles an order of that size, thinking that, as expected of someone so important within the massive merchant guilds, Remy responds as though arranging something like that were child's play. At the same time, the head of Melandum starts growing suspicious of Kai again and wonders whether he tried to leave so quickly specifically to pressure her into closing the deal with Remy before she had any chance to negotiate. Once the total is calculated, including transportation, the order comes to approximately 4,200,000 regel, and Oliva agrees to cover the amount even though she knows the money will come out of her own pocket. Remy even comments that because it is such a large sum, the payment can be settled later, but makes it clear that the agreed deadline must be respected. The outrageous cost explains why maintaining mana infusion throughout the entire project is not something that could simply be included in a construction job worth only a few 100,000 regel. Each complete mana recovery potion costs around 150,000 regel, while each medium magic recovery potion costs roughly 50,000 on top of transportation fees, which also increase depending on the products involved. Since the order is urgent and the items are fragile, the price rises even further. Oliva is especially impressed by the way Remy considers all those factors and calculates the total immediately, once again acknowledging that she truly is the daughter of the man who leads the merchant guilds. Remy looks at Oliva as naturally as ever and warns her that if she fails to meet the agreed payment deadline, she should be prepared to face the consequences. The remark catches Oliva completely off guard, causing her to flinch and lose her composure for a moment before nervously replying that she understands. However, another detail begins to bother her. After running the numbers, she realizes that the additional transportation cost practically offsets the value of the extremely expensive sweets Kai just brought for the workers, and her paranoia immediately comes roaring back. To Oliva, it starts to seem as though the god of destruction even predicted that everything would end up this way. Kai, completely unaware of any of this, simply praises Remy for managing to close such a large contract and comments that everyone at home will surely be proud of her. Remy looks at him and concludes that she finally understands what Kai had been doing from the very beginning, leaving the protagonist completely confused. When he asks what exactly she means, the girl decides to drop the subject and says it is nothing. Oliva, however, interprets that small exchange in an entirely different way and believes Kai realized that the sweets were merely a pretext, calculated exactly how much they were worth, and used all of it to create the current situation. To her, that supposedly humble attempt at an apology begins to look less and less innocent. Oliva concludes that this must be the method Shikoku uses to pressure powerful figures without ever making it seem as though he is pressuring anyone at all. Even though she is irritated by the feeling that she has been manipulated so perfectly, the woman is not merely frustrated. Her competitive spirit begins to boil and she decides that she still needs to find some way to turn the tables. That is when she notices an opportunity. Oliva asks whether, since Lord Shikoku went to the trouble of visiting the construction site personally, he would like to see with his own eyes the quality of the mana infusion that Melandum takes such pride in. Kai becomes interested and asks whether it is the same technique used to reinforce weapons and armor. Oliva confirms that it is. The protagonist admits that he is curious, although he is still thinking about the things he needs to take care of afterward and does not want to stay there too long, but Oliva insists that the demonstration will only take a few minutes and will not be any trouble. At that moment, Remy becomes excited as well and says that she wants to see it. Oliva inwardly celebrates the girl's unexpected assistance and takes the opportunity to ask Kai once again whether he agrees. With no real reason to refuse and seeing that Remy is interested too, the protagonist accepts, as long as it does not interfere with the work. Kai then asks how exactly he is supposed to evaluate the quality of the reinforcement. Oliva explains that he only needs to lightly strike a section coated with mana infusion using his weapon, since the resistance he feels upon impact will be enough for him to notice the difference. Internally, she is completely confident. No matter how much Shikoku may be known as the god of destruction, a structure wrapped in mana is another matter entirely. Mana infusion can make even ordinary stone as durable as steel. Kai, however, warns her that if he touches that material with his sword, the blade will probably just cut straight through it. Oliva finds it perfectly understandable that he would have such confidence in his own weapon, but assures him with a smile that there is no need to worry because the reinforcement will not even be scratched. Kai is genuinely impressed and comments that if that is really true, then the technique is incredible. Convinced that she has finally found a way to return the pressure she believes Shikoku placed on her, Oliva decides to create a situation where Kai will have practically no choice but to perform the test exactly as in her mind he had done during the earlier negotiation. The head of Melandum then extends her hand and begins channeling a large amount of magic into several stones, surrounding the material with intense purple energy until she prepares a sample completely reinforced with mana infusion in front of them. Satisfied with the result, Oliva thinks that there are no hard feelings and gestures toward the block, asking Kai to test the structure's durability. At that very moment, one of her subordinates arrives carrying the refreshments and announces to the workers that the sweets have been delivered. Kai takes the opportunity to thank them for their hard work and effort, while the employees gather around the boxes and become excited when they discover that the sweets came directly from Lord Shikoku, commenting on how delicious they look. Oliva replies that it was no trouble at all, but inwardly she is already imagining how she can turn the test into publicity for Melandum. To her, all they would need to do is spread the story that the reinforced structure was so durable that even Shikoku was left speechless. A story like that would further increase the company's achievements, fame, and reputation, while also allowing them to improve the rewards and conditions offered to their employees. With everything prepared, Kai realizes that using his sword so close to Remy could be dangerous and asks the girl to wait a little farther away. Oliva then positions herself in front of him and says he may begin whenever he is ready, adding that he should strike gently and carefully so there is no risk of damaging his own blade. Kai grips the sword with both hands and begins drawing it, causing intense blue energy to envelop the weapon. For a moment, he studies the reinforced target in front of him and, completely unaware of how much confidence Oliva has placed in the structure's durability, says that he will test it right away. Kai focuses and exhales while Oliva remains confident that everything will go perfectly. He then raises the sword and swings, and the instant it touches the material, the blade passes through the stone with absurd ease, cutting through the reinforced block almost without any resistance at all. Remy is shocked by what she sees while the protagonist looks slightly awkward. Oliva remains completely frozen for several seconds, wondering what just happened and whether she is hallucinating. Remy then coldly asks whether Oliva overestimated herself, causing the woman to panic and beg her not to jump to conclusions, insisting that there must be some kind of misunderstanding. Internally, Oliva cannot comprehend what she just witnessed. Mana infusion allows even a simple stone to reach a level of durability comparable to iron. It is a technique she has always taken pride in, and one that has built an almost flawless track record over the years. Yet Shikoku just destroyed it right in front of Remy, leaving the girl with an impression that may be impossible to undo. Worse still, Oliva knows perfectly well that Kai did not even use any kind of magical enhancement on the sword. He practically just let the blade fall onto the stone and it was cut apart. Desperate to salvage the situation, Oliva tries to explain that it is not exactly the gentleman standing before them who is strange, only to get tangled in her own words, before finally concluding that what they just witnessed was simply a feat that is difficult to describe. Kai, not understanding why everyone is so shocked, asks what feat she is talking about, leaving Oliva even more desperate. To her, his genuinely confused expression only makes it look even more as though she'd been lying about the material's durability. No longer knowing how to explain herself, Oliva addresses Lord Shikoku and internally remembers the overwhelming confidence with which she had declared that the stone would not even be scratched. Since she needs to restore her image in Remy's eyes at any cost, she insists on asking Kai whether he at least felt that the stone was tougher than an ordinary one. Kai pauses for a moment to think, but Oliva presses him again, asking whether he noticed any difference. The protagonist finally apologizes and honestly admits that he could not feel anything at all. The answer nearly makes Oliva collapse, unable to believe that even the difference in resistance was completely imperceptible to him. The situation becomes even more worrying when she looks over at Remy. Oliva knows that the Alblera family's commercial organizations value trust above everything else, and she believes the girl must have been taught the same principles. That is precisely why Remy is now looking at the situation with so much suspicion. Before Oliva can sink even deeper into despair, Kai steps in and asks Remy to calm down. When the girl asks what he means, he explains that watching someone else do something is different from trying it yourself, since the results will not always be the same. That is why the most important thing is to verify things personally before reaching a conclusion. Remy understands the advice, and Kai decides to prove his point in a very simple way. He picks up a stone and asks the girl to use another one to strike the stone he is holding. Remy does exactly that and hits the stone in the protagonist's hands. Kai asks whether she really struck it with force, and the girl confirms that she did. He praises her effort, but Remy notices that the stone she hit ended up being marked. Kai examines the scratch and confirms that even with that amount of force, an ordinary stone really does take damage. After that, he approaches Oliva and asks whether she can apply the same magical reinforcement to that stone. Oliva immediately agrees and begins enveloping the material in her magic. Even in such a critical moment, she has to restrain herself internally from making some stupid joke while working. But she manages to finish the reinforcement without any trouble and hands the prepared stone back. Kai thanks her and asks Remy to repeat exactly the same test as before. This time, the girl announces that she is going to put even more strength into the strike, and Kai simply encourages her to do her best. Remy raises the other stone over her head and brings it down much harder against the reinforced one. After the impact, Kai shows her the result and points out that this time there is not a single scratch. Remy examines it carefully and confirms that he is right. The protagonist then explains that this is exactly what he meant when he talked about the importance of checking things for yourself. The demonstration finally makes Remy understand, and the girl admits that she learned something new. Realizing that she had also unfairly doubted Oliva, she bows and apologizes. Oliva immediately panics at the sight of a young lady from the Alblera family, apologizing to her like that, and repeatedly asks Remy to raise her head, assuring her that there is no problem at all. Kai is pleased with the girl's attitude and says that she is a good girl, because no matter how much power or influence someone has, knowing how to apologize is still important. Remy brightens at the praise and, as if offering him a reward, says that she will now allow him to pat her head. Kai immediately refuses, saying that if he does something like that in public, people will start thinking he is some kind of big shot. Hearing that, Oliva almost wants to ask who exactly he thinks he is fooling, since Shikoku is already one of the most terrifyingly influential people involved in this whole situation. Even so, after everything that just happened, she decides internally that she will do whatever she can to help him and cover for any problems. Kai then laughs and remarks that, when he thinks about it, dealing with all of this is complicated for both of them. Oliva is not quite sure how to respond and simply thanks him, but soon begins wondering whether Shikoku noticed how difficult it is for her to deal with people of such importance and somehow showed her a bit of sympathy. Before leaving, Kai sincerely thanks her for all her help and says that he will leave the rest of the work in her hands, trusting her to take care of everything. Oliva promptly assures him that she will. With that settled, the protagonist calls Remy so they can head back, and the girl happily agrees. As the two walk away and Kai eventually ends up carrying Remy on his back again, Oliva watches them leave and finally realizes just how differently her attempt to compete with Shikoku turned out from what she had imagined. She had planned to use his name to create a new achievement for Melandum, but in the end, Kai was the one who did her an enormous favor. Not only did he create an opportunity to strengthen ties with the Alblera family's commercial organizations, he also helped prove in front of Remy that mana infusion really worked and saved Oliva's reputation. The woman finally admits to herself that Shikoku was never someone she could compete with in the first place, and, completely exhausted by the entire experience, concludes that at least the lesson did not cost her too much to learn. As Kai continues carrying Remy on his back through the streets at dusk, the two finally arrive in front of the girl's home. Remy asks whether he intends to come inside, but the protagonist replies that he only wanted to escort her there. Internally, Kai admits that he has absolutely no desire to face the leader of the commercial organizations, a man who holds practically absolute authority in that world. Remy does not understand why he is refusing and tries to persuade him, saying that her family could welcome him properly and that there are even plenty of snacks inside. But Kai chooses to simply appreciate the thought. He reminds her that she still needs to tell her parents about the deal she just made and comments that it would be terrible for him to show up right when everyone will probably become busy with that. In truth, Kai simply feels that this is not the best time to show his face there and believes that once Remy finishes giving her report, everything will be settled. To end the discussion, he apologizes and makes up an excuse that he still has several matters to take care of, causing Remy to complain that he could have told her that earlier. Kai apologizes again and inwardly feels even guiltier because that is also a lie. Curious, Remy asks whether he is busy because of work and tries to confirm whether it has something to do with his supposed job as an intelligence agent, although she makes it clear that she knows she should not be asking questions about it. Kai starts to worry because he cannot let the girl discover that he does not actually have any kind of job like that, so he vaguely replies that every kind of work is difficult in its own way. Remy quickly asks whether there is anything she or her father can do to help, and even offers to provide as many items as he might need. Kai quickly refuses and tells her not to worry, because he gets everything he needs from the organization he belongs to, or at least he tries to make it sound that way. Hearing that he can obtain anything he needs, Remy immediately imagines how enormous that organization must be and says that it sounds incredible. Kai tries to downplay his own importance and says it is nothing special, but Remy recalls that her father always says that truly exceptional people tend to be humble. Not knowing how to respond, the protagonist merely comments that Of course, there are also excellent people who do not fit that description at all. Remy then declares that even against an organization that large, she has no intention of losing. Excited, she raises her arms and promises that one day she will become strong enough that Kai can rely on her family as well. The protagonist is surprised to realize that the girl is talking specifically about him, and Remy explains that Kai saved her life and also gave her a dream. Now she wants to grow up, gather many of those medicines, and use them to help people in need the same way he helped her. Hearing that, Kai recognizes that the girl is aiming incredibly high, but considers it a truly wonderful dream. To him, as long as Remy continues carrying such a noble goal, her family's commercial organizations will surely prosper even further, and the protagonist hopes that she never loses that pure heart. Wanting to encourage this new beginning, Kai then suggests that Remy visit his house another day because there is something he would like to give her as a present. The girl's eyes immediately light up, and she asks to go there right that moment, but Kai reminds her that he still has his supposed obligations to deal with. Remy pouts and asks at least what she is going to receive, but he tells her that she will have to wait until the visit to find out. Refusing to give up, Remy decides that she will go to his house the next day. Kai hesitates for a moment, but since he truly has no plans for tomorrow, he eventually agrees. The girl celebrates happily, and the protagonist tells her that she should go inside now and get ready for the following day. Remy cheerfully says goodbye, climbs down from his back, and runs into the house, loudly announcing that she is home. Inside, however, her father immediately corrects her, saying that simply announcing that Remy has returned is not enough, and that there is something more important she should say. Her older sister also appears and scolds her, even lightly hitting her on the head, causing Remy to complain to her father and ask him to scold her sister instead. The man replies that it cannot be helped because Remy went out alone without even taking a guard, and if anything had happened, it would have been too late for regrets. Her sister agrees with their father, although he eventually relaxes once he realizes that his daughter returned safely. Shortly afterward, however, Panlard looks around and notices that Lord Shikoku is nowhere to be seen, asking whether he was not accompanying Remy. She explains that Kai brought her all the way to the front door but left immediately because he had Vertar work to take care of. Panlard shows some disappointment at not being able to receive him, but a few seconds later both he and his eldest daughter notice something strange and turn toward Remy at the same time. The two ask whether that was really what Shikoku said. Remy replies that it was not, since he never even mentioned Vertar. All Kai said was that he had a few matters to take care of, and that he could obtain anything he needed, so she simply assumed he was talking about his work. Hearing the explanation, Panlard concludes that speaking with such certainty about being able to acquire any necessary resource really does sound like something only someone connected to Vertar could do, and Remy's sister is also impressed by their father's reasoning. Remy then remembers something else and proudly announces that she managed to secure a job, supplying 10 complete mana recovery potions and 50 medium magic recovery potions, with all of them to be delivered directly to the stone bridge. Panlard immediately finds that strange and asks whether she means the very bridge whose restoration their family helped finance. Remy confirms it and adds that payment will be made later. Her father becomes even more intrigued because he does not remember there being any work on that project that would require such an absurd amount of magical power. Remy explains that they said the structure would be reinforced through mana infusion, and that this was exactly what happened while she was at the bridge with Kai. Panlard remains silent for a few moments until he understands what he believes is happening, and Remy's sister also notices the possible connection between the events. After putting the pieces together, the man can only remark that Shikoku truly does some frightening things. Without wasting any time, Panlard heads to his office, takes out a blue communication crystal, and immediately contacts his subordinates. He orders them to prepare 10 complete mana recovery potions and 50 medium magic recovery potions, and have everything delivered to the stone bridge without delay. One of the reasons the family's commercial organizations have grown so large is precisely this communication system, which allows orders to be transmitted quickly combined with a massive number of employees and stocked inventories capable of fulfilling urgent requests almost immediately. During the conversation, Panlard also refuses a certain charge and simply tells them to inform Melandum that the company will owe them a favor instead. After ending the communication, Remy asks in surprise whether her father really has no intention of accepting payment for the merchandise. Panlard confirms it and explains that although accepting the money would certainly bring them a large profit right now, they are dealing with Melandum. In this case, selling them a favor and establishing a connection with a company of that size will be far more valuable in the future than simply collecting an immediate profit. With the deal set in motion, Remy's sister hugs her and praises her for the excellent job she did. Remy becomes completely pleased with herself and asks her sister to keep praising her even more, while her sister plays along and showers the girl with affection. Panlard, however, remains deep in thought. He cannot understand how Shikoku knew that their family wanted to establish a connection with Melandum, and, on top of that, created a situation that allowed Remy herself to achieve something significant. The family had taken on part of the bridge restoration costs precisely to repay, even if only slightly, everything Kai had already done for them. But now the man feels that Shikoku has somehow given them yet another benefit in return. Wanting to understand the situation better, Panlard asks what else Remy talked about with Lord Shikoku along the way. The girl casually replies that they talked about all kinds of things, and her father asks her to tell him everything in detail. Seeing nothing wrong with it, Remy then reveals that she promised to visit Kai's house the following day to receive a gift. At that exact moment, Panlard and his eldest daughter are both completely shocked and shout at the same time as they realize the scale of the problem that, in their minds, has just appeared. After regaining his composure, Panlard declares that he will allow Remy to visit Lord Shikoku, but sets one absolute condition: she must not accept the gift. Remy immediately refuses and argues that Kai even said she could come empty-handed, so there is absolutely nothing wrong with accepting whatever he prepared for her. Her father grows even more desperate and insists that she cannot allow herself to be guided so easily, while her sister tries to make her listen to the adults. Remy, however, fully enters her stubborn mode and starts protesting, shouting that she is going to accept the present and that no one will stop her. Her sister looks at Panlard with no idea what else to do, and comments that Remy has entered that state where she simply refuses to listen to anyone. Her father is also left with no way out, because there is a promise made directly to Lord Shikoku, and they cannot simply forbid the girl from going either. Remy keeps shouting that she already understands, turning the conversation into a small commotion inside the house. Unable to resolve the situation at that moment, Panlard decides to suspend the discussion for now and says that everyone will talk about it again once his wife returns. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.